I stood at my penthouse door watching my mother and sister shiver in the hallway, their designer clothes soaked from the storm outside. Just 3 years ago, they'd thrown me out with nothing but the clothes on my back, believing Emma's vicious lie that I'd stolen her inheritance money. Now, here they were begging for shelter after losing everything. I touched the door handle, remembering the night they called me a thief and changed the locks. Then I smiled and slowly pushed it shut. 3 years before that moment at my penthouse door, life had seemed so different. I was 25 years old, fresh out of college with my marketing degree, and living back home with my mother Margaret and younger sister Emma. The arrangement made financial sense while I worked my way up from my entry-level position at a local advertising firm. Every morning, I'd wake up in my childhood bedroom, the walls still painted the soft lavender I'd chosen in high school, and head downstairs to find Mom already brewing coffee in her favorite ceramic pot. Our father had passed away when Emma and I were teenagers, leaving Mom to raise us alone. She'd done remarkably well keeping us in our suburban Denver home and maintaining the lifestyle Dad's insurance and savings had provided. Mom worked as a real estate agent, her natural warmth drawing clients who became friends, and her commission checks kept us comfortable. Emma, at 22, had just finished her business degree and was supposedly job hunting, though I noticed she spent more time shopping than submitting applications. The dynamics in our house had always been clear. I was the responsible one, the daughter who helped with bills, cooked dinner when Mom worked late, and made sure Emma got to her college classes on time. Emma was the baby, the one who could charm her way out of any situation with her bright smile and infectious laugh. Mom often said Emma reminded her of Dad with that same mischievous sparkle in her hazel eyes. I didn't mind being the dependable daughter. It felt good to take care of my family. Everything changed the day we received a letter from Grandmother Rose's attorney. She had passed away 6 months earlier, a dignified woman who lived quietly in Maine and sent us birthday cards with crisp $20 bills tucked inside. The letter informed us that she'd left more than we'd ever imagined, $200,000 for each granddaughter held in trust until we turned 25. Emma wouldn't receive hers for 3 more years, while mine was already available. Can you believe it? Mom had gasped, pressing her hand to her chest as we sat around the kitchen table. Mother never said anything about having this kind of money. Emma's reaction worried me from the start. Her eyes had lit up with an intensity I'd never seen before, and she immediately started making plans. When I get mine, I'm going to travel the world, maybe buy a condo downtown or invest in cryptocurrency. I chose to be more cautious with my inheritance, deciding to leave it untouched while I planned carefully. The money felt like a safety net, a chance to maybe start my own business someday or help Mom retire early. I filed the paperwork to transfer the funds to a high-yield savings account and tried to continue life as normal. But normal didn't last long. 2 weeks after the inheritance news, I came home early from work with a migraine and found Emma in my room rifling through my desk drawers. Papers were scattered across my bed, including the bank documents for my trust fund. "What are you doing?" I asked, too shocked to be angry yet. Emma jumped, then quickly composed herself. "Oh, I was just looking for a stapler. You know mine broke." "In my private papers," she shrugged, that charming smile appearing instantly. "Sorry, Claudia. I didn't mean to snoop. I just got curious about the trust fund stuff. It's so exciting, isn't it?" I should have been more suspicious, but Emma had always been impulsive and nosy. I gathered up the papers, locked them in my filing cabinet, and forgot about the incident. I had no idea she'd already photographed everything with her phone, including my social security card and bank account numbers. Over the next few months, I started noticing strange changes in Emma. She'd disappear for entire evenings, coming home with shopping bags from expensive stores, but claiming friends had treated her. She became secretive about her phone, always angling the screen away from others. When collection calls started coming to the house, she insisted they were mistakes wrong, numbers looking for someone else. The truth revealed itself on a Thursday evening. I'd stayed late at work to finish a presentation, and when I finally got to my car, I found Emma in the parking garage. She was crying mascara, streaming down her cheeks, her whole body shaking. "I need help," she sobbed, throwing herself into my arms. "I'm in so much trouble, Claudia. I don't know what to do." I held her while she cried, then drove her to a quiet coffee shop where she finally confessed. She'd started gambling online, just small bets at first, convinced she had a system. But losses led to bigger bets, trying to win back what she'd lost. Now she owed nearly $15,000 to various credit cards and online lenders, all taken out using fake information. "They're threatening to call Mom," Emma whispered, gripping her coffee cup so tight her knuckles were white. "They're saying they'll sue me, maybe press fraud charges. I can't go to jail, Claudia. I can't." My responsible instincts kicked in immediately. "Okay, calm down. We'll figure this out. Do you have documentation of all the debts?" She nodded, pulling out her phone to show me screenshots. The numbers made my stomach drop, but I kept my face neutral. "I'll help you," I promised. "We'll set up a payment plan, get you into counseling for the gambling, but you have to stop Emma completely." "I will, I swear. I've already deleted all the apps. I just need help with the current mess." I spent the next week quietly liquidating some of my investments, pulling together $18,000 to cover her debts and give her breathing room. I made her sign a promissory note, though we both knew I'd probably never enforce it. The important thing was keeping our mother from finding out and getting Emma back on track. "You're the best sister in the world," Emma said when I handed her the cashier's check. "I'll pay you back every penny, I promise." I believed her. That was my first mistake. My second was not realizing that while I'd been helping Emma clean up her gambling mess, she'd been building an elaborate plan. She'd taken those photos of my documents months ago for a reason. She'd studied my signature, practiced forging it until it was perfect. She'd learned my passwords by watching me type, memorized my routines, and prepared for the moment she'd need a scapegoat. Because Emma hadn't stopped gambling, she'd simply gotten better at hiding it, and worse at controlling it. The $18,000 I'd given her disappeared within 2 weeks, lost on what she was sure would be the big win. When the creditors started calling again, when the threats became more serious, she knew she needed a permanent solution. And that solution was me. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs I missed. The way she'd ask detailed questions about my trust fund, pretending it was just sisterly curiosity. How she'd volunteer to get the mail, always checking it before bringing it inside. The times I'd find her near my room, claiming she was just walking by. She was gathering intelligence, preparing her attack, and I was too trusting to see it. The storm that would destroy my life was already forming, built from Emma's lies and my mother's blind faith in her youngest daughter. I went to bed each night in my lavender room thinking I was safe in my childhood home, surrounded by family who loved me. I helped with groceries, paid for Emma's gas when she claimed to be broke, and listened to Mom talk about her real estate deals over dinner. We were a family healing from the loss of my father, made stronger by our struggles. But Emma had already decided I would be her sacrifice. While I slept peacefully down the hall, she was creating fake bank statements showing withdrawals from her trust fund. She was drafting emails from my account, sending them to herself, and then deleting them from my sent folder. She was building a case against me with the thoroughness of a prosecutor, knowing exactly which buttons to push to turn our mother against me. The last normal morning of my life, I made breakfast for all 3 of us. Scrambled eggs and wheat toast orange juice in the glass pitcher Mom loved. Emma came down late, yawning and complaining about not sleeping well. Mom rushed through her meal, having an early showing in Cherry Creek. I cleaned up while they both got ready for their days, humming along to the radio, completely unaware that Emma had already lit the fuse that would blow my life apart. "Love you, girls," Mom called as she headed out the door. "Love you too," Emma and I responded in unison, just like we had 1,000 times before. Within 6 hours, that love would turn to hatred, and I would discover just how masterfully my sister had orchestrated my downfall. But in that moment, washing dishes in the morning sun, I was just Claudia, the responsible daughter, the protective big sister, the one who could fix any problem. I couldn't have imagined that I was the problem Emma had decided to fix. The destruction of my life began at 4:17 on a Friday afternoon. I remember the exact time because I was watching the clock, eager to finish my workday and start the weekend. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom wants us both home right now. Emergency family meeting." My heart jumped to worst-case scenarios as I drove home. Had something happened to one of Mom's siblings? Was there a problem with the house? I rushed through yellow lights and took corners too fast, my mind racing through possibilities. Nothing I imagined came close to the ambush waiting for me. I found them in the living room, positioned like judges at a tribunal. Mom sat in Dad's old leather chair, her face carved from stone. Emma perched on the couch, tissues clutched in her trembling hands, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Documents spread across the coffee table like evidence in a courtroom. "Sit down, Claudia," Mom said, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. I remained standing, my keys still in my hand. "What's going on? Is everyone okay?" Emma let out a sob that sounded rehearsed to my ears now, though at the time, it just confused me. "How could you do this to me? How could you steal from your own sister?" The words hit me like a physical blow. "What, Emma? What are you talking about?" Mom picked up a paper from the table, her hands shaking with rage. "These are bank statements from Emma's trust fund account. Someone has been making withdrawals, $73,000 in the past 2 months. My legs went weak. I sank onto the ottoman, trying to process what I was hearing. That's impossible. Emma can't even access that money for 3 more years. Except someone did access it, Mom continued, her voice rising. Someone with her personal information. Someone who knew her social security number, her mother's maiden name, all her security questions. Emma's performance escalated. She pulled out her phone with shaking fingers, showing Mom something on the screen. "Look at these emails, Mom. They're from Claudia's account asking me for my passwords, saying she needed them to help me with financial planning." I felt like I was falling through space. I never sent those emails. Emma, you know I didn't. "Stop lying," Emma screamed, jumping to her feet. "I trusted you. When you offered to help with my budget last month, I thought you were being a good sister, but you were just gathering information to rob me." The pieces clicked horribly into place. Her request for budget help, which I'd provided innocently. The questions about trust funds she'd been asking, she'd built this trap carefully, and I'd walked right into it. "Check my bank accounts," I said desperately. "I haven't deposited any money like that. This is insane." Mom's laugh was bitter. "Of course you didn't put it in your regular accounts. Emma already told me about your secret offshore account, the one you bragged to her about when you were drunk last week." "I don't drink, and I don't have any offshore accounts." I turned to Emma, searching for some sign of the sister I thought I knew. "Why are you doing this?" But Emma was deep in her role now. She pulled out more papers, hands as theatrical in their shaking. "I found these in your room, Claudia. Printouts about transferring money internationally. Research about countries without extradition treaties." "You went through my room." "I was looking for my blue sweater," she said, the lie rolling smoothly off her tongue. "But I found these hidden in your closet, along with this." She produced a notebook I'd never seen before, filled with what looked like my handwriting. Practice signatures of Emma's name, bank routing numbers, password hints. It was masterful forgery work, and I realized with dawning horror how long she must have been preparing this. Mom snatched the notebook, her face growing paler with each page. "This is sick, Claudia. You documented everything, like you were proud of it." "That's not mine. Can't you see what's happening here? Emma's setting me up." "Oh, now I'm the villain." Emma's voice dripped with wounded innocence. "I'm not the one who's been stealing. Look at this." She opened her laptop, navigating to what appeared to be security footage. The grainy video showed someone who looked like me at an ATM making a withdrawal. The timestamp matched one of the alleged thefts from her trust fund. "That's not possible," I whispered, my mind reeling. "I was at work that day. Check with my office." "I already did," Mom said coldly. "Your supervisor said you called in sick that day. Funny how you forgot to mention that." I had been sick that day, spending it in bed with food poisoning, but how could I prove that Emma had thought of everything, even checking my work schedule to pick days when I couldn't provide an alibi? "What about the security footage from here?" I asked desperately. "Check our doorbell camera. It'll show I was home." Emma's face crumpled. "I checked it earlier. Somehow all the footage from those days has been deleted. Claudia must have erased it." Of course she had checked. Of course it was deleted. Every escape route I thought of she'd already blocked. The fury building in my chest competed with sheer disbelief at the thoroughness of her betrayal. Mom stood up, towering over me with parental authority. "I want you to admit what you've done. Tell the truth, and maybe we can work through this as a family." The truth. The truth is that Emma's a gambling addict who owes money all over town. I've been helping her pay off debts, and this is how she repays me. Emma gasped as if I'd slapped her. "How dare you try to turn this around on me, Mom? She's doing exactly what guilty people do, attacking the victim to deflect attention." "I have proof." I pulled out my phone, scrolling frantically for the screenshots Emma had sent me of her debts, but they were gone. My messages with her had been edited, showing only innocent conversations about shopping and work. She deleted them. "Emma, you deleted everything." "Listen to yourself," Mom said with disgust. "Conspiracy theories and accusations. I raised you better than this, Claudia. Your father would be ashamed." That cut deeper than anything else. I felt tears burning my eyes, but refused to let them fall. Dad would want you to hear my side. He'd want you to look at actual evidence, not just believe whatever Emma says. "The evidence is right here." Mom gestured at the damning papers. "Bank statements don't lie, Claudia. Security footage doesn't lie. You're the only one lying here." Emma moved closer to Mom, the picture of a supportive daughter. "I didn't want to show you this, Mom, but I think you need to see it." She pulled up her banking app, showing transaction after transaction. She didn't just take the $73,000, she's been slowly draining my checking account too. Little amounts here and there, probably testing to see what she could get away with. I stared at the screen in horror. The transactions were real, but I knew exactly where that money had gone. To Emma's gambling sites, her shopping sprees, her credit card payments. But of course, the descriptions had been altered. Instead of "Bet Now Casino," they read "Transfer to CM," my initials. "I want you out," Mom said, her voice flat and final. "Pack your things and leave." "Mom, please. Let's go to the police. Let them investigate. I'll take a polygraph test. Anything." Emma clutched Mom's arm. "No police. I don't want Claudia to go to jail. She's still my sister, despite everything. I just want her gone and the money returned." It was brilliant. By seeming merciful, she ensured there would be no real investigation that might uncover her lies. Mom looked at her youngest daughter with pride and pity. "You're too good, Emma, after what she's done to you." "How can you believe her over me?" I asked Mom, my voice breaking. "I'm the one who's been here. I'm the one who helps with bills, who takes care of everything. When have I ever lied to you?" "Apparently, you've been lying this whole time," Mom replied. "Playing the perfect daughter while stealing from your sister. The worst kind of deception is wrapped in kindness." Emma pulled out her final weapon. "Claudia, just tell the truth. I'll forgive you. We can get you help. Maybe it's kleptomania or something, a mental illness. We won't judge you." The trap was complete. Deny it, and I'm a remorseless thief. Admit to something I didn't do, and I'm mentally ill and still a thief. Every word I spoke dug me deeper into the hole she'd created. "You have 2 hours," Mom announced, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling a locksmith now. Your keys, please." "You're really gonna throw me out, your own daughter?" "My daughter wouldn't steal." Wouldn't lie to my face. Wouldn't betray her family like this. Mom's voice cracked slightly, the only sign this was affecting her at all. I don't know who you are, but you're not the girl I raised. Emma stood there, tears streaming down her face in a performance worthy of an Oscar. But when Mom turned to make her call, I caught a glimpse of Emma's real expression, the satisfied smirk of a chess player who just called checkmate. Your car keys, too, Mom said, holding out her hand. It's in my name. Remember, you can take your personal car, the Honda. Nothing else that I've paid for. My 12-year-old Honda Civic against Emma's 2-year-old Lexus that Mom had gifted her. Another injustice in a day full of them. I dropped my house and car keys on the coffee table, the sound echoing like a judge's gavel. Can I at least say goodbye to my room? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Mom nodded curtly. 2 hours. Emma will supervise your packing to make sure you don't take anything that isn't yours. The humiliation was complete. My sister, my betrayer, would watch me pack up my life. As I headed upstairs on legs that felt disconnected from my body, I heard Mom comforting Emma. It's not your fault, sweetheart. Sometimes people we love disappoint us, but I'm here. I'll always protect you. Those words echoed in my head as I climbed the stairs to pack up 25 years of life, knowing that my mother's protection had a limit, and I'd just discovered exactly where that boundary was. Emma had drawn the line perfectly, placing me on the outside while she remained wrapped in maternal love and trust. My lavender walls looked gray in the evening light, already becoming someone else's room. Someone who hadn't been branded a thief and cast out like a leper. Someone whose sister hadn't orchestrated their complete destruction with the precision of a surgeon. As Emma followed me into my room, closing the door behind her with a soft click, I turned to face her one last time as sisters. What? I asked simply. For just a moment, her mask slipped. Because I could, she whispered, her eyes glittering with something dark and satisfied, and because you were stupid enough to let me. Then the tears returned, the performance resumed, and she became the victim again. Just pack your things, Claudia. Haven't you hurt me enough? I turned away from her and began putting my life into boxes, each item I touched a reminder of the family I was losing and the sister I'd never really had at all. 2 hours to pack up 25 years of life. I moved through my room mechanically, Emma's watchful eyes tracking my every movement from her perch on my desk chair. She'd positioned herself perfectly to see everything I touched, occasionally making small sounds of distress when I reached for something she deemed too valuable for a thief to take. My hands shook as I folded clothes into my old college duffel bag. Each piece held memories that now felt tainted. The sweater Mom bought me last Christmas. The dress I wore to Emma's college graduation where I'd cheered the loudest. The jacket Dad gave me before he died, which Emma now pointed at with narrowed eyes. That's real leather, she said coolly. Probably worth a few $100s. Maybe you should leave it. Dad gave this to me, I said, clutching it to my chest. Did he, though, or did you just take it after he died? I'm starting to question everything about you. The cruelty was surgical. I packed the jacket anyway, daring her to physically stop me. She didn't just make a note in her phone, probably documenting my theft of my own belongings. From downstairs, I could hear Mom on the phone with the locksmith negotiating an emergency evening call. Yes, tonight. It's a security issue. My former tenant has to be locked out immediately. Former tenant, not daughter. The demotion was complete. I moved to my small jewelry box, another gift from Dad. Inside were mostly costume pieces, but a few held real value: my grandmother's pearl necklace, a gold bracelet from my 21st birthday, the small diamond earrings I'd bought myself after my first promotion. Emma stood up, moving closer. Those stay, she said firmly. Family heirlooms belong to family. These are mine, I protested. You were there when I received most of them. Were you there when you stole my money? Oh, wait, you thought you were being sneaky about it. She held out her hand. The jewelry stays. I could have fought her, could have pushed past her and taken what was rightfully mine. But Mom's footsteps on the stairs stopped me. She appeared in the doorway, the locksmith apparently scheduled, and looked at the jewelry in my hands. Problem? She asked coldly. Emma's voice was small and wounded. She's trying to take Grandma's pearls and all the valuable jewelry. I think she's planning to pawn it. Mom's face hardened further if that was possible. Leave it all, Claudia. Take your clothes and personal items only, nothing that could be sold. My laptop, I asked, gesturing to my work computer. That was a birthday gift from me. It stays. I need it for work. You should have thought of that before you became a thief. Mom's voice was implacable. Clothes, toiletries, your personal documents, that's all. I moved numbly to my desk, gathering my birth certificate, social security card, and what few financial documents Emma hadn't already contaminated with her lies. As I opened drawers, I realized my emergency cash was gone. The envelope that had held nearly $800 was empty. Looking for something? Emma asked innocently. I couldn't even accuse her. What would be the point? She'd just claim I was lying again, or worse, that I'd hidden stolen money there. I closed the drawer and continued packing in silence. My phone buzzed with notifications. Word was already spreading. Emma had been busy in the 2 hours since the confrontation, texting our extended family her version of events. Aunt Patricia. How could you? Cousin Michael, your mom told us everything. Disgusting, Uncle Ray. Don't contact us again. Contact us. Each message was another cut my family tree being pruned of my presence in real time. Emma watched me read them with poorly concealed satisfaction. I had to tell them, she said with fake regret. They deserve to know what kind of person you really are, for their own protection. I turned off my phone, unable to bear more rejection. In my closet, I reached for my interview suit, the one I'd need to job hunt with. Emma made another note in her phone. That's a designer suit, she observed. Anne Klein, right? Probably worth $400. I bought it myself, with my own money, from my job. Your job that you skipped to steal from me? She shook her head. I don't think you've been honest about anything. Mom reappeared as I zipped up my bags. Time's up. Let's go. I looked around my room one last time. The photos on my wall smiled back at me. Family vacations, birthday parties, graduations. Emma and I with our arms around each other at the beach. Mom and I baking cookies last Thanksgiving. All of it felt like evidence from someone else's life now. My photos, I asked, already knowing the answer. Leave them, Mom said. I don't want you taking pictures of Emma or me. We don't know what you might do with them. Even my memories were being confiscated. I shouldered my bags and walked past them each step, feeling like a mile. In the hallway, I passed Emma's room, her door open to reveal her expensive furniture, her flat-screen TV, her collection of designer bags. All of it purchased with money I now understood came from darker sources than Mom's generosity. At the front door, Mom held out her hand again. Your house key! I'd already given it to her, but she wanted the spare from my keychain too. I worked it off the ring with numb fingers, the familiar weight of it strange in my palm before I handed it over. Your father's watch, she said next, noticing it on my wrist. Mom, please, Dad specifically left this to me. He left it to his daughter. I don't have a daughter who steals. She waited, hand still extended. I unclasped the watch, the last piece of my father I could carry with me, and placed it in her palm. Emma made a small, satisfied sound behind me. Outside, the evening had turned cool. My Honda Civic sat in the driveway, looking small and vulnerable next to Emma's pristine Lexus. I loaded my bags into the trunk, aware of our neighbors watching through windows. Mrs. Chen from next door had stepped onto her porch, pretending to water plants that didn't need watering. Claudia, Mom called from the doorway. I turned, hope flickering that she might reconsider, might offer a moment of doubt or maternal concern. Instead, she held out a manila envelope. Your car insurance documents. It's paid through the end of the month. After that, you're on your own, and your phone is on our family plan. You have until tomorrow to get your own service. The businesslike tone hurt more than anger would have. I was being efficiently removed from the family infrastructure, deleted like a computer file. I took the envelope without comment. Emma appeared beside Mom, wrapping an arm around her waist in a show of solidarity. "I hope you get help," she called out loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Stealing is often a cry for attention. Maybe therapy would help." Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. I could practically see the gossip spreading through the neighborhood phone tree already. By tomorrow, everyone would know that Margaret's eldest daughter was a thief who'd been rightfully cast out. I got into my car, started the engine, and backed out of the driveway I'd pulled into thousands of times. In the rearview mirror, I saw Mom and Emma standing in the doorway, backlit by the warm light of home. Emma waved sadly, playing her role to the last detail. Mom just turned and went inside. 3 blocks away, I had to pull over. The shaking had spread from my hands to my whole body, and I couldn't see through the tears anymore. I sobbed until my ribs hurt, until my throat was raw, until I had nothing left. Then I wiped my face, started the engine again, and drove toward the unknown. My phone rang. For a moment, wild hope flared that Mom had realized the truth, but it was my manager from work. "Claudia, I just got the strangest email from someone claiming to be your sister. She says there's a family emergency and you'll need extended leave." I closed my eyes. Emma's reach extended even to my job. "It's complicated," I managed. She also sent some concerning information about financial irregularities. Something about theft. "Claudia, what's going on?" "Can we talk on Monday?" I asked desperately. "In person, I can explain everything." His pause told me everything. "I think it's best if you take some time to sort out your personal matters. We'll consider this administrative leave for now. But Claudia, the allegations are serious. HR will need to be involved." He hung up before I could respond. Administrative leave was corporate speak for "don't come back." Emma had been thorough, destroying not just my family, but my professional reputation as well. I drove aimlessly for an hour, my fuel gauge dropping toward empty along with my options. My credit cards were in my wallet, but I was afraid to use them. Would Emma claim those charges were more theft? Had she already called the credit card companies with some story? Finally, I parked at a 24-hour grocery store and used my phone while it still worked. I had maybe $600 in my checking account until my next paycheck, which now might never come. No family, no home, no job. Just my 12-year-old car and 2 bags of clothes. I scrolled through my contacts looking for someone who might help, but Emma had poisoned that well too. 3 friends had already texted variations of "I can't believe you did this" and "don't contact me again." She must have reached out to everyone in my phone, painting me as a dangerous thief who might target them next. Sarah Martinez, my college roommate, hadn't texted yet. I called her, praying she'd answer. "Claudia," she sounded wary, "I just got the weirdest Facebook message from your sister." "Whatever she said, it's not true," I said quickly. "Sarah, I need help, just for tonight. I can explain everything." She sent screenshots, "Claudia, bank statements, security footage. It looks pretty damning." "You've known me for 7 years. Have I ever stolen anything, ever lied to you, ever been anything but responsible to a fault?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Where are you?" Relief flooded through me. King Soopers parking lot on Colorado Boulevard. My roommate's not comfortable with... "I'm sorry, Claudia. I want to believe you, but the evidence... Maybe there's a shelter or something..." She hung up before I could beg. My best friend, the woman who'd held my hair back through college hangovers and cried with me when Dad died, believed Emma's lies over 7 years of friendship. I Googled women's shelters, my fingers clumsy on the phone screen. Most were full or required advance booking. One had a bed available, but it was in a part of town my dad had always warned us away from. With no other options, I drove there anyway. The shelter was a converted motel, its neon sign flickering weakly. Women clustered outside, smoking and eyeing my car with interest. Inside the desk, clerk looked at my clean clothes and nervous demeanor with suspicion. "You running from someone?" she asked bluntly. "Boyfriend, husband, family situation," I said quietly. She softened slightly. "First time homeless?" The word hit like a slap. Homeless. That's what I was now. "Yes." "Bed's $20 a night. No drugs, no weapons, no guests. Showers down the hall. Locks broken, so take your valuables with you. Breakfast is at 7, but come early if you actually want food." I paid for 3 nights, hoping I'd figure something out by then. The room was just a bed and a dresser, the walls stained with things I didn't want to identify. Someone had scratched "This too shall pass" into the paint above the bed. I sat on the thin mattress, fully clothed, my bags clutched against my chest. Through the thin walls, I could hear crying, arguing, someone praying loudly. This morning, I'd woken up in my lavender bedroom, worried about a presentation at work. Tonight, I was homeless, jobless, and utterly alone. My phone buzzed with one last message before the service cut off at midnight. It was from Emma. "I know you're reading this. Just wanted you to know I'm sleeping in your bed tonight. Mom said I could have your room since mine is being renovated. Sweet dreams, sis." I turned off the phone and lay back on the lumpy pillow. Somewhere across the city, Emma was surrounded by my things, sleeping in my bed, wearing the mask of the wronged sister. She'd stolen everything from me and convinced everyone I was the thief. The last thing I thought before exhaustion took me was that she'd been wrong about one thing. She hadn't stolen everything. She'd stolen my present, but my future was still mine to build. I just had to survive long enough to build it. The women's shelter became my world for 3 weeks. Each morning, I woke to the sounds of suffering children crying for breakfasts their mothers couldn't provide, women arguing over shower time, the constant shuffle of feet on worn linoleum. My designer interview suit hung in the shared closet like a relic from another life, growing more wrinkled each day, despite my attempts to smooth it by hand. Finding work proved nearly impossible. Emma's sabotage was thorough and devastating. Every job application required references, and she'd contaminated them all. During phone interviews, potential employers would start enthusiastic, then their tone would shift after checking my background. "We've received some concerning information," they'd say carefully. "Perhaps this isn't the right fit." I learned to recognize the exact moment Emma's poison reached them, the pause, the cleared throat, the suddenly formal tone. After 2 weeks of rejections, I stopped applying for marketing positions altogether. My Honda, my last connection to stability, died on a Tuesday morning. The engine made a grinding sound, shuddered, and went silent forever. The mechanic at the corner shop looked at it with pity. "Engine seized. Would cost more to fix than the car's worth." He wiped his hands on a greasy rag. "I could give you $200 for scrap." $200 for the car that had carried me to college, to my first job, to what I thought would be my future. I took it because I needed to eat, and my savings had dwindled to nothing. Walking away from the shop, I felt another piece of my old life disappear into the gray Denver morning. Without a car, even minimum wage, jobs became harder to reach. I walked miles each day wearing through the soles of my professional flats until I had to line them with cardboard. The shelter had a donation bin where I found a pair of sneakers, only slightly too large, the kind of shoes I would have donated myself just months ago. Desperation led me to a fast food restaurant hiring for night shift. The manager, a tired-looking man named Carl, barely glanced at my application. "Can you start tonight?" he asked. "Yes," I said immediately. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., minimum wage, no benefits for 90 days. Still interested, onions. I was scheduled before I could finish nodding. The uniform shirt he handed me smelled like old grease and broken dreams, but it meant income, however small. That first shift broke something in me. The fluorescent lights turned everyone's skin gray. My coworkers were mostly people like me, the desperate, the struggling, those whom life had knocked down and kept kicking. We moved like ghosts, assembling burgers for drunk college students and early morning construction workers, none of whom saw us as human. During my break, sitting on milk crates in the alley behind the restaurant, I made the mistake of checking my phone. Social media showed me the life I'd lost. Emma had posted photos from my old room, now redecorated in her style. So grateful for family support during difficult times. Her caption read. The comments overflowed with sympathy. For her ordeal, my theft of her money, apparently common knowledge. One photo stopped my heart. She wore my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one Mom had insisted I leave behind. Grandma Rose would want me to have this, she'd written. Family heirlooms belong with family. The rage that filled me was so intense I had to put the phone down before I threw it. But rage was a luxury I couldn't afford. I had 20 minutes left on my break and floors to mop. After 3 weeks at the shelter, my time was up. They had a strict limit, and the waiting list was long. I'd saved enough from my fast food job for a week at a cheap motel, but after that, I'd be on the street. The other women at the shelter had taught me survival tricks, which churches served free meals, where to shower at truck stops, how to sleep in your car safely, except I didn't have a car anymore. My health began to deteriorate. The stress manifested physically. My hair fell out in clumps. My hands shook constantly, and panic attacks hit without warning. During one shift, I collapsed in the kitchen, my body simply refusing to continue. Carl found me hyperventilating by the freezer. You okay? He didn't sound concerned, just annoyed at the disruption. I'm fine, I gasped, forcing myself upright. Just need a minute. Take 5, then get back on register. We're slammed. There was no health insurance, no sick days, no room for weakness. I worked through migraines, through stomach bugs, through days when the anxiety was so bad I could barely speak to customers. The weight fell off me until my uniform hung loose, but I couldn't afford to eat more than once a day. One night, a familiar face appeared at the drive-through window. Megan Porter from high school, someone who'd once copied my homework in AP history. Her BMW idled expensively as recognition dawned on her face. Claudia, oh my God, is that you? I forced a smile, handing her the credit card reader. Hi, Megan. I heard about, Emma told everyone. She trailed off, embarrassment replacing her initial shock. I'm so sorry about everything. Would you like your receipt? I asked, clinging to professional script. She drove away quickly, but not before I saw her uploading something to Instagram. Within hours, Emma had posted a response. Sad to see how far she's fallen, but choices have consequences. Still praying she gets help for her issues. The humiliation was complete. Everyone from our past now knew I was working fast food, fallen from marketing professional to burger flipper. The comments section became a feeding frenzy of schadenfreude and false concern. Then came the night that nearly broke me entirely. I was walking back to the motel after a particularly brutal shift when 3 men started following me. My feet ached, my whole body screamed for rest, but I quickened my pace. Hey, restaurant girl, one called. Working girl, how much for some company? I ran, then my 2 large sneakers slapping against wet pavement. They laughed, but didn't pursue their entertainment found in my fear, rather than actual assault. I made it to the motel and barricaded my door, then sat in the bathtub fully clothed, shaking until dawn. That's when I met Diane. She was sitting outside the motel the next morning, feeding pigeons from a bag of breadcrumbs. Everything about her seemed worn, her clothes, her shoes, the deep lines around her eyes. But something in her posture spoke of former authority. Rough night, she asked as I stumbled past. I must have looked as destroyed as I felt, because she patted the bench beside her. Sit. You look like you need to. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the motherly concern in her voice that I'd been starved for. But I sat. The story poured out of me: Emma's betrayal, Mom's abandonment, the systematic destruction of my life. Diane listened without judgment, occasionally tossing more crumbs to her birds. Family betrayal cuts the deepest. she said when I finished. I should know. My son convinced my board I was mentally incompetent and staged a coup. Took over my company, my assets, everything. I looked at her more carefully. Despite the worn clothes, she had an unmistakable air of education and refinement. You were a CEO, Stewart Technologies, built it from nothing into a $30 million company. She smiled ruefully, thought I was raising a successor. Instead, I raised a corporate raider who happened to share my DNA. How do you keep going? She was quiet for a moment, watching the pigeons peck at crumbs. Because the best revenge is to rebuild, not for them, but for yourself. To prove that what they took wasn't what made you who you are. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. Not hers, but her daughter's. Catherine's a good kid, nothing like her brother. She runs a small digital marketing startup. They're always looking for talent. I stared at the card like it might disappear. But I have nothing. No references, no portfolio anymore, no car to get to work. You have experience. And more importantly, you have hunger. The real kind, not the MBA variety. Diane stood her knees creaking. Tell Kat that Diane sent you. She'll understand. Why are you helping me? Because someone helped me once when I was sleeping in my car and contemplating which bridge would be quickest, she smiled sadly. And because I recognize a fighter when I see one. You're not broken, yet just bent. There's a difference. I held the business card carefully, afraid to hope. Another chance, another potential rejection, but what did I have to lose anymore? Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet, Diane said, shuffling away. Thank me when you're running your own company and some bitter old woman needs a hand up, then you'll understand why I helped. That night, my last at the motel, I used the business center computer to research Catherine Stewart and her company Rebirth Digital. Small but growing, focused on innovative campaigns for startups. They'd need someone who understood struggle, who could market to the underdog because they'd been one. I had one decent blouse left hidden at the bottom of my bag. I washed it in the motel sink, dried it with the hairdryer, and prepared for one more chance. My hands shook as I dialed the number the next morning, but my voice was steady when Catherine answered. My name is Claudia. Your mother Diane suggested I call. There was a pause, then warmth flooded Catherine's voice. If my mom sent you, then you must be special. Can you come in this afternoon? I calculated the bus route, the 2-hour journey each way. Yes, absolutely. As I hung up, I touched the business card like a talisman. I'd hit rock bottom so hard I'd felt the impact in my bones, but I was still breathing, still fighting. Emma had taken everything she could see, but she couldn't take my will to survive. And sometimes that's all you need to start climbing back up. Catherine Stewart's office occupied the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in Reno, Denver's Arts District. I arrived 40 minutes early, having taken 2 buses and walked the last mile to save fare money. My one decent blouse clung to my back with nervous sweat despite the cool October air. I sat on a bench outside, practicing my pitch and praying my appearance didn't betray how desperate I was. The receptionist, a young man with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers, offered me water while I waited. Kat's just finishing up a client call. She's excited to meet you. Anyone Diane sends is golden in our book. That tiny kindness, a glass of water freely given, almost undid my composure. After weeks of being treated as invisible or worse, basic human decency felt like a gift. Catherine appeared exactly at 2 o'clock. She was nothing like I'd expected from a CEO's daughter, ripped jeans, a vintage band t-shirt, sneakers that had seen better days. But her handshake was firm and her gaze direct. So, you're the one who impressed my mother, she said, leading me to her office. That's no small feat. She's met hundreds of homeless individuals over the past 2 years, but she's only given out 3 cards. Her office was organized chaos whiteboards covered in campaign ideas, sticky notes in rainbow colors, 3 monitors showing different social media analytics. She gestured to a beanbag chair, then laughed at my expression. Sorry, we're still working on adult furniture. Startup life. She pulled over a proper chair from the corner. Tell me about yourself. Not your resume, not your credentials. You. What drives you? The question caught me off guard. For weeks, I'd been in survival mode, reduced to basic needs: food, shelter, safety. But something in Catherine's genuine interest unlocked words I didn't know I'd been holding. I used to think I was driven by success, I said slowly. Good job, nice family, comfortable life. But when I lost all that, I discovered I'm actually driven by proof. Proof of what? That circumstances don't define worth. That being knocked down doesn't mean staying down. That the people who betray you don't get to write your ending. Catherine leaned back, studying me. My mother lost everything to family too. Did she tell you? My brother convinced the board she was losing her mental faculties, had her removed from her own company. She went from CEO to homeless in 6 months. She mentioned it. I'm sorry that happened to her. Don't be sorry. Be angry. Be motivated. Be determined to build something they can never take. She pulled out a folder. I had my assistant pull what public information exists about you. The internet tells an interesting story. Marketing coordinator with stellar performance reviews, then suddenly unemployed amid vague accusations of financial misconduct. No charges filed. No formal complaints, just whispers and innuendo. My chest tightened. It's complicated. It always is when family's involved. Catherine's voice was matter-of-fact, not pitying. Here's what I know: you're here despite everything. You got my mother's attention, which means you're a fighter. And right now, I need fighters more than I need pristine resumes. I don't have a car, I blurted out, or proper clothes, or even a permanent address. I'm living in a motel and working fast food night shifts just to eat. You should know that before... Before what? Before I offer you a chance. Catherine smiled. Claudia, half my team started from nothing. Marco, out front. He was living in his car when I hired him. Now he's my lead designer, Jin my developer, fresh out of prison for hacking. Sometimes the best people are the ones society throws away. She opened her laptop, showing me a client brief. Local nonprofit needs a complete rebrand. They help women leaving domestic violence situations start their own businesses. Budget small, timelines tight, and they're skeptical of marketers who haven't lived through real struggle. Think you could handle it? I studied the brief, my mind already spinning with ideas. When do I start? Now, if you want. Fair warning, I can only offer intern wages initially, $15 an hour, but you can work as many hours as you want. We have a couch in the break room if you need to crash sometimes. Kitchen's always stocked. And if you prove yourself on this project, we'll talk about a permanent position. $15 an hour was more than double my fast food wage. Yes, God, yes, thank you. Don't thank me, earn it. She stood, extending her hand again. Welcome to Rebirth Digital. We live up to our name here. I called Carl from the office bathroom, quitting the fast food job effective immediately. He cursed at me for leaving him short-staffed, but I felt no guilt. That place had been slowly killing me. This was my chance at resurrection. The first week was brutal in the best way. I worked 18-hour days, fueled by office coffee and determination. The nonprofit project became my obsession. I interviewed survivors, listened to their stories of rebuilding, and crafted a campaign that turned their scars into strength. Catherine was right about the couch. After 3 nights of commuting to the motel, I gave up and started sleeping at the office. Marco didn't judge when he found me brushing my teeth in the bathroom at 6 a.m. Instead, he brought me a spare toothbrush and some travel shampoo. We've all been there, he said simply. There's a shower in the gym downstairs. Building code says it's for tenants only, but the security guard is cool if you go early. The team embraced me with the casual acceptance of people who understood struggle. Jin taught me coding basics during lunch breaks. Sarah, the accounts manager, shared her wardrobe after noticing my limited options. They didn't ask about my past. They cared about my present contribution. My campaign for the nonprofit launched 3 weeks later. The tagline, "From survivor to CEO, your story isn't over," came from my own journey. The visual identity balanced vulnerability with power using Phoenix imagery that resonated without being cliché. The client cried during the presentation. "You get it," she said, gripping my hand. "You actually understand what we're trying to build." That night, I slept on the office couch with my first sense of peace in months. I'd created something meaningful, something Emma couldn't steal or destroy. My bank account was still nearly empty, but my spirit had found its first spark of recovery. Catherine called me into her office the next Monday. "The nonprofit loved your work. They want to expand the campaign, and they specifically requested you lead it." She slid a paper across the desk. "This is a job offer. Junior account manager, $40,000 a year health insurance, and a $1,000 signing bonus to help you get stable housing." I stared at the number. It wasn't much by Denver standards, but it was everything to someone who'd been counting pennies for bus fare. "There's one condition," Catherine continued. "I want you to document your journey, blog video, whatever medium feels right. My mother believes in the power of recovery stories. She thinks yours could help others." "But my sister, my family, they've painted me as a thief. Going public could—" "Oh, could what make people think badly of you?" Catherine's laugh was sharp. "They already do, but the truth has a way of surfacing, especially when you're the one telling it. Besides, the best revenge against a false narrative is success they can't explain away." I signed the offer letter with hands that barely shook. That afternoon, I used part of my signing bonus to put down a deposit on a studio apartment. It was tiny, just 400 square feet, but it had a lock on the door and a shower that was mine alone. My first night there, I sat on the floor. Furniture would come later, and wrote my first blog post. 3 months ago, I lost everything to a lie. Family, home, career, reputation. Gone overnight. I've slept in shelters, worked jobs that barely kept me fed, and wondered if the false narrative about me would become my only truth. But today, I signed a lease. Today, I have a real job with people who judge me by my work, not my worst moment. Today, I start telling my own story. To anyone reading this from their own rock bottom, keep climbing. The view changes as you rise. I posted it before I could lose my nerve, then closed my laptop and looked around my empty apartment. No furniture, no decorations, just space that was legally mine for the next year. Emma had taken my past, but she'd accidentally given me something precious, the knowledge that I could build a future from absolutely nothing. My phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had shared my blog post, then another. By morning, it had 50 comments from strangers who'd faced their own betrayals and rebuilds. Each story was different, but the theme was the same: survival, despite those who tried to bury us. Catherine was right. The best revenge wasn't destroying those who hurt you. It was rebuilding so brightly that your light exposed their darkness without you having to say a word. But first, I needed a bed. And maybe a coffee maker. Everything else, including justice, could wait while I remembered how to live instead of just survive. Success has a way of creating ripples. 6 months into my position at Rebirth Digital, those ripples began reaching unexpected shores. My blog about rebuilding from betrayal had grown into a modest following. I wrote weekly posts about resilience, financial recovery, and the complicated grief of losing family to lies. The comments section became a support group for others navigating similar losses. Catherine promoted me to full account manager after I landed 3 major clients with campaigns built on authentic struggle and triumph. My salary increased to $52,000, enough to furnish my apartment with second-hand treasures and start a savings account. I even bought professional clothes from consignment shops, slowly rebuilding the wardrobe Emma's lies had cost me. The first sign that Emma's world was cracking came through LinkedIn. A former colleague from my old company messaged me, "Hey, Claudia, weird question. Your sister just applied here." She listed you as a reference. I know there was drama, but wanted to check if you're okay with us calling you. I stared at the message, fury and confusion warring in my chest. Emma using me as a reference after destroying my career. The audacity was breathtaking. We're estranged, I replied carefully. I can't provide a reference for her. Sorry. His response came quickly. No worries. Actually makes sense now. She seemed off in the interview, kept talking about her trust fund and how she didn't really need the job. Red flags everywhere. Emma job hunting meant something had shifted. She'd never worked content to live off Mom's generosity and whatever schemes she ran. If she needed employment, the money might finally be running out. The revelation accelerated 3 weeks later when my bank called about unusual activity on an old account I'd forgotten to close. Someone attempted to access this account using your social security number and mother's maiden name, the fraud specialist explained. We flagged it because the IP address originated from Denver, but you'd listed your account as compromised months ago. We wanted to verify this wasn't you. Definitely not me. I confirmed, my heart racing. Can you tell me anything else? The person knew significant personal information, but failed the security questions about your first pet and elementary school. They made 3 attempts before we locked the account. Emma. It had to be Emma. She'd known enough to try, but not enough to succeed. After destroying my life, claiming I'd stolen from her, she was now actually attempting to steal from me. I documented everything, creating a file I hoped I'd never need, but suspected I would. The blog post I wrote that week was about protecting yourself from financial fraud by family members. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments from people who'd experienced similar violations of trust. One comment stood out. This happened to me with my gambling addict brother. He started with emotional manipulation, then moved to identity theft when the money ran out. Document everything. They always escalate. That night, I invested in identity protection services and froze my credit. If Emma was desperate enough to attempt fraud, she was spiraling. The question was how far she'd fall and who she'd try to take with her. The answer came through an unexpected source. Javier, who worked at the bank that held our family accounts, was Jin's boyfriend. Professional ethics meant he couldn't share specific information, but Denver's finance world was small and gossip traveled. Major trust fund drama at work. Javier mentioned during a team happy hour. This woman came in screaming about her trust being frozen, claimed her financial advisor stole from her, but the investigation showed she'd blown through $200,000 in less than a year. Gambling sites, luxury goods, cash withdrawals, total mess. My margarita glass paused halfway to my lips. When was this? Last week. Security had to escort her out when she started threatening staff. Said she'd sue everyone, that her mother was connected, that we'd all regret this. He shook his head. Rich people problems, right? Rich people. Emma had burned through her entire inheritance in 18 months. The money she'd accused me of stealing, the fortune she'd destroyed my life to protect, gone. Probably lost to the same gambling addiction I'd tried to help her overcome. The cosmic justice of it should have felt satisfying. Instead, I felt oddly empty. Emma's self-destruction didn't restore my family or erase the months of homelessness and degradation. It was just another tragedy in a story full of them. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know what you did. You think you're so clever getting my trust frozen, but I have proof of your theft. Pay me back the $73,000 you stole or I go public with everything. I screenshot the message and added it to my growing documentation file. Emma had moved from fraud attempts to explicit extortion. The desperation reeked through the screen. Another text. Don't ignore me, Claudia. I still have Mom's ear. One word from me and she'll make your life hell again. Remember what happened last time. A third. You owe me. After everything I've done for you, keeping quiet about your mental problems and theft issues. $50,000 and I'll leave you alone forever. The number changed, but the messages continued over the next week. Threats alternating with sob stories, attempts at guilt, followed by rage. I documented them all but didn't respond. Catherine connected me with a lawyer who sent a cease and desist letter, but the texts continued from new numbers. Then silence. For 2 weeks, nothing. The quiet felt more ominous than the harassment. I found out why when Margaret called my office. My mother's voice on the line after a year of silence made my hands shake. Claudia, she sounded older, uncertain. The receptionist said you work there. What do you want? I kept my voice professional, aware of my coworkers nearby. Emma's missing. She disappeared 2 weeks ago. I hoped maybe you'd heard from her. The woman who'd thrown me away without hesitation now sought my help, finding the daughter she'd chosen over me. The irony was suffocating. I haven't heard from her, I said truthfully. The extortion text didn't count as hearing from her in any way Margaret needed to know. She's been struggling, Margaret continued as if I cared. Some bad investments, problems with creditors. I've been helping, but my resources are limited now. Limited, meaning Emma had drained those too. I'm sorry to hear that, I said flatly. Is there anything else? The pause stretched between us, filled with everything we couldn't say. Finally, you sound well, professional. I'm glad you're okay. I'm not okay. I'm surviving despite you. There's a difference. I ended the call before she could respond. That night, I wrote my most vulnerable blog post yet, about the complicated grief of losing a mother who was still alive, about the realization that the people who should protect you can become your greatest threat, about building a life in the shadow of betrayal while waiting for the other shoe to drop. The response crashed my website temporarily. Thousands of shares, hundreds of private messages from people who'd lived similar stories. A literary agent reached out about turning my blog into a book. A podcast wanted me as a guest. My story of survival was resonating in ways I'd never imagined. Meanwhile, Emma remained missing. I learned from social media that she'd been seen at various casinos in Black Hawk and Central City, the mountain gambling towns outside Denver. The trust fund princess was chasing her losses in the same places that had started her downward spiral. Margaret called twice more. I didn't answer. She left voicemails I deleted without listening. Whatever Emma's disappearance meant for their relationship, it didn't restore what they'd taken from me. But the revelations weren't done. My old colleague messaged again. You'll never guess what I just learned. That trust fund drama your sister was involved in. Turns out she'd been forging documents for years. The bank found evidence going back to before your family issue. They're building a criminal case. I stared at my phone screen, pieces clicking into place. Emma hadn't just fabricated evidence against me. She'd been running scams for years, and I'd been convenient cover when it started unraveling. The $73,000 she'd accused me of stealing had probably never existed. Just numbers on forged statements to explain away money she'd already lost. For the first time since that awful night in my childhood home, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not healing, but clarity. Emma had built a house of lies, and now she was trapped inside as it collapsed. Margaret had chosen to believe those lies, and now she was alone with the consequences. And I was building something real on the ashes of what they'd burned. Every client I landed, every blog post I wrote, every night I slept safely in my own apartment was proof that their narrative hadn't won. But I knew Emma would resurface eventually. Desperate people always do. And when she did, I'd be ready with documentation lawyers and boundaries built from titanium. The revelation stage wasn't complete, but the foundation was cracking. Soon the full truth would emerge. I just had to keep building while I waited for their world to finish falling apart. Year 2 at Rebirth Digital began with Catherine calling me into her office, but this time her expression held excitement rather than concern. "Pack your bags," she announced. "We just landed Moonshot Enterprises. They want a complete rebrand, and they specifically requested the team lead who wrote that viral piece about authentic recovery narratives." Moonshot was a unicorn startup in the tech space, the kind of client that could transform a small agency's reputation overnight. My viral blog post about rebuilding after betrayal had caught their founder's attention. A woman who'd built her company after her own business partner tried to destroy her. "They want to meet you personally," Catherine continued. "In San Francisco, all expenses paid. Claudia, this could change everything for us." The presentation in San Francisco went better than I dreamed. Moonshot's founder, Grace Chen, saw her own story reflected in mine. We secured not just the rebrand, but a year-long retainer worth more than Rebirth's entire previous annual revenue. My commission from that single deal equaled 6 months of my salary. Catherine made me partner on the flight home. "You've brought in 40% of our revenue this year. You deserve equity, not just a paycheck." I signed the partnership papers while flying over the mountains that had witnessed my lowest moments. Somewhere below, Emma was still running from her creditors, but I was soaring literally and figuratively above it all. The success snowballed. My authentic approach to marketing, born from genuine struggle rather than MBA theory, resonated with clients tired of glossy emptiness. Within 6 months, I was running a team of 5, all hired from unconventional backgrounds. We called ourselves the Phoenix Division, and our campaigns turned underdog brands into market leaders. My blog evolved into a book deal with a major publisher. From Ashes to Empire, a guide to rebuilding when everything burns, pre-sold 10,000 copies. The advance was more than I'd made in my entire first year at Rebirth. I put most of it into savings, but allowed myself one luxury, a new Honda Civic bought with cash to replace the one that had died during my darkest days. The speaking invitations started rolling in. Business schools wanted me to guest lecture about resilience. Women's conferences sought my perspective on overcoming family betrayal. Each appearance expanded my network and brought new clients to Rebirth. Then Jin made a discovery that changed everything. "Boss, you need to see this," he said, pulling me into the conference room where he'd set up multiple monitors. "Remember how you asked me to do deep digital forensics on your sister? I found something massive." The screens showed bank records, forged documents, and a complex web of financial fraud dating back 5 years. Emma hadn't just stolen from her trust fund or attempted to access my accounts. She'd been running identity theft scams on multiple family members, neighbors, even casual acquaintances. "This is just what I could find publicly or through legal database searches," Jin explained. "The real numbers, probably higher. But Claudia, look at this timestamp." He highlighted a transaction dated 3 months before I was kicked out. Emma had successfully accessed my personal savings account, draining the $800 I'd saved, the same money I'd discovered missing while packing. "She stole from you before framing you for stealing from her," Jin said quietly. "This proves systematic fraud. And look here, she did the same thing to your cousins, your aunt, even your elderly neighbor. Small amounts from each flying under the radar until she got too greedy with the trust fund lie. I finished." We compiled everything into a comprehensive report. My lawyer friend Samantha reviewed it with growing excitement. "This is enough for criminal charges. Multiple counts of identity theft, fraud, forgery. We're talking serious prison time." But I hesitated. Sending Emma to prison felt like perpetuating the cycle of destruction. Instead, we sent the information to the bank, investigating her trust fund fraud. Let them decide how to proceed. I had an empire to build. The Phoenix Division's success caught media attention. Forbes ran a feature, "From Homeless to CEO, How Claudia Martinez Built a Marketing Empire on Radical Authenticity." The article went viral, bringing even more clients seeking our unique approach. I moved from my studio apartment to a 2-bedroom condo in Capitol Hill. Nothing extravagant, but it had a home office and a view of the mountains. Sometimes I stood on my balcony remembering nights in the shelter when I'd wondered if I'd survive until morning. My team grew to 12 people each with their own story of rising from ashes. We instituted the policy where 5% of profits went to a fund helping people escape abusive family situations. The first recipient was a young man whose parents had stolen his identity and ruined his credit. We helped him rebuild just as I'd been helped. Catherine and I strategized about spinning Phoenix Division into its own company. The numbers made sense. We were generating enough revenue to stand alone. But I wanted to honor the chance she'd given me, so we structured it as a sister company under the Rebirth umbrella. The launch party for Phoenix Marketing happened exactly 2 years after I'd been homeless. The contrast wasn't lost on me as I stood in our new office space surrounded by clients, colleagues, and chosen family. My former colleague from the old job attended, having followed my journey through social media. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "When your sister sent those emails, I should have questioned it, should have known you better than that." "You believed what you were shown," I replied. "Cons work because they exploit trust. Don't apologize for having trusted someone." The party was in full swing when security called me. "There's a woman outside claiming to be your sister. She's not in good shape. Should we call the police?" I found Emma huddled by the entrance, a shadow of her former self. Designer clothes replaced by thrift store mismatches. Perfect makeup now poorly applied over hollow cheeks. The gambling had carved away everything soft, leaving only desperate edges. "Quite a party," she said, trying for her old manipulative charm but achieving only pathos. "My successful sister, who would have thought—" "What do you want, Emma?" "I know you sent that information to the bank. They're pressing charges. Identity theft, fraud, a bunch of technical terms that mean my life is over." She laughed bitterly. "Guess you got your revenge." "You got your consequences. There's a difference." She studied the building directory showing Phoenix Marketing's logo. "You named it that on purpose. Rising from ashes. Very poetic. Very pointed." "I named it that because it's what I did, what my entire team did. We all had someone try to burn us down. The difference is what we built from the ashes." "I need help," she said, finally the mask dropping completely. "I've lost everything. Mom won't talk to me since she found out I forged her signature on a second mortgage. I'm sleeping in my car. The casino banned me. I've got nothing left to lose. Claudia, nothing." I looked at my sister. Really looked at her for the first time in 2 years. The golden child who destroyed my life was gone, replaced by someone addiction, and consequences had hollowed out. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sympathy, just the neutral observation of cause and effect completing its circuit. "There's a rehab facility in Aurora that specializes in gambling addiction," I said finally. "They have a scholarship program for people who can't afford treatment. I can give you the information, but that's all. You getting help has to be your choice, not my project." "That's it, information. After everything we've been through?" "Everything you put me through," I corrected. "Emma, you didn't just steal money or tell lies. You tried to erase me. You took my family, my home, my identity, and tried to rewrite my story with you as the victim. So yes, information is all I'm offering. It's more than you left me with." I handed her the rehab facility's card and walked back to my party. Through the windows, I watched her stand there for a long moment before shuffling away into the night. Maybe she'd get help. Maybe she'd continue spiraling. Either way, it was her choice now, her consequences to navigate. Inside, my team was toasting our latest client win. Jin had his arm around Javier, both laughing at something Catherine said. My chosen family built on mutual respect rather than blood obligation. We'd all been someone's discarded story, and we'd all written better endings. "Everything okay?" Samantha asked, noticing my reflection. "Everything's perfect," I said, meaning it. Just watching the past, tried to catch up and realizing it can't reach this high. The party continued late into the evening, celebrating not just business success, but the sweeter victory of lives rebuilt on our own terms. Outside, Emma disappeared into the Denver night, carrying the rehab information that might save her or might end up in the gutter with all her other discarded chances. But that wasn't my story anymore. Mine was here in this building I'd helped create, surrounded by people who'd proven that sometimes the best families are the ones you choose. The empire wasn't just the business, or the money, or the recognition. The empire was the unshakable knowledge that I'd built something from nothing and no one, not even the sister who tried to destroy me, could ever take that away. The call from Javier came on a Thursday morning while I was reviewing campaign strategies with my team. His usually calm voice carried an edge of professional excitement barely contained. "Claudia, you need to see the news. Channel 7, now." We turned on the conference room television to find Emma's face filling the screen. Not the hollow addict I'd seen months ago, but a police booking photo. The headline scrolled beneath, "Denver woman arrested in multi-state identity theft ring." "Turn it up," Jin whispered. The reporter's voice filled the room. "Emma Morrison, 29, was arrested yesterday as part of a joint FBI and Colorado Bureau of Investigation operation. Authorities allege Morrison was part of a sophisticated identity theft ring that targeted family members and close associates across 5 states, resulting in over $2 million in fraudulent transactions." My coffee cup trembled in my hand as the report continued. They showed evidence, photos, forged documents, fake IDs, computer equipment. Then came the detail that stopped my heart. The investigation began after Morrison attempted to implicate her sister in theft charges 3 years ago. When banks noticed discrepancies in her claims, they uncovered what prosecutors are calling an avalanche of deception. The team sat in stunned silence as more details emerged. Emma hadn't acted alone, but had partnered with a man she'd met at the casinos, someone who specialized in identity theft. Together, they'd targeted vulnerable people, with Emma providing personal information about family and friends, while he handled the technical aspects. Among the victims, the reporter continued, was Morrison's own mother, who lost her home to foreclosure after Morrison forged documents for a second mortgage. Also targeted were several elderly relatives, former classmates, and neighbors who trusted Morrison with personal information. They interviewed the lead investigator, a stern-faced woman who didn't mince words. This wasn't desperation or addiction driving poor choices. This was calculated, deliberate victimization of people who loved and trusted the defendant. The evidence suggests she kept detailed notes on potential targets, including psychological profiles on how to best manipulate them. My phone exploded with messages. Former family members who'd shunned me were suddenly reaching out. Cousins apologizing for believing Emma's lies. Aunts expressing shock and sympathy. Uncle Ray, who'd told me never to contact him again, left a voicemail that just said, "I'm sorry, Claudia. We should have known." But the revelation that shattered my composure came next. The news showed an evidence list, and there it was. Exhibit 47 journal detailing plan to frame CM for theft, dated 6 months before alleged incident. She'd planned my destruction for half a year. Every sisterly moment in those months, every shared meal, every casual conversation had been reconnaissance for my execution. "You okay, boss?" Samantha asked gently. I excused myself and made it to the bathroom before the tears came. Not tears of sadness, but of validation so intense it felt like drowning. For 3 years, I'd carried the weight of being disbelieved, of having my truth dismissed as lies. Now the world could see what I'd always known. When I returned to the conference room, Catherine had dismissed the team except for my inner circle. On the screen, a familiar face appeared, Margaret Morrison, my mother, looking like she'd aged a decade in 3 years. "Mrs. Morrison, how do you respond to these allegations against your daughter?" My mother's face crumbled. I can't believe it. Emma was always such a good girl. There must be some mistake." What about your other daughter, Claudia, the one Emma accused of theft? Um, Margaret's silence spoke volumes. Even now, with Emma exposed as a serial fraud artist, she couldn't bring herself to acknowledge her error. Finally, I don't wish to discuss that. But the reporter persisted. Our investigation shows Claudia Morrison is now a successful business owner, having rebuilt her life after being falsely accused. Have you attempted to reconcile? No comment. Margaret walked away from the cameras, but not before I saw the expression on her face. Not guilt, not regret, but confusion. She genuinely couldn't process how the daughter she'd chosen had been the destroyer all along. The next hours brought a cascade of revelations. Jin worked his digital magic, legally accessing court documents as they became public. The evidence against Emma was overwhelming: keystroke loggers on family computers, hidden cameras in homes she'd visited, detailed psychological profiles of victims that read like predators' notes. One document made me physically ill. Emma had written about me, C2 trusting. Hero complex makes her easy to manipulate. Give her someone to save gambling story and she'll hand over access to everything. Use her reputation for responsibility against her. No one will believe the good daughter is a thief. This is beyond fraud, Samantha said, reading over my shoulder. This is psychological warfare. The FBI contacted me that afternoon. Agent Chen was professional but clearly disgusted by what she'd uncovered. Ms. Morrison, we need your testimony. Your sister kept extensive records of her plans to frame you. Your case was apparently her masterpiece, the one that would set her up for life. Set her up how? She believed that with you discredited and estranged, she'd have full access to your mother's assets as the only trusted daughter. She didn't anticipate your mother's resources being finite or her own gambling accelerating beyond control. I agreed to cooperate fully. As I hung up, another call came through. A number I recognized but hadn't seen in 3 years. Claudia! Margaret's voice was small, broken. I saw the news. What do you want, Margaret? I couldn't call her mom anymore. The FBI just left. They showed me things, documents, plans, photos of our house she'd taken to case it for valuables, recordings of conversations where I defended her while she laughed about how stupid I was. I said nothing, letting her sit with the weight of her choices. I threw you away, she continued, her voice cracking. My own daughter. You begged me to investigate, to look deeper, and I threw you away like garbage. For her. For someone who was documenting my manipulation in real time. Yes, I said simply. You did. Could we talk in person? I know I have no right to ask, but… no. The word came out firm, final. Margaret, you didn't just believe her lies. You celebrated them. You changed the locks while I packed. You told family I was mentally ill. You watched me beg for 2 hours to be heard and chose her tears over my truth. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. I'm your mother, she whispered. You were. Now you're just someone who taught me that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and that sometimes the family that destroys you opens the door to the family you build. I have to go. My real family is waiting. I hung up and blocked the number. Around me, my chosen family, Catherine, Jin, Samantha, and the others who'd believed in me when I had nothing, formed a protective circle. We ordered Thai food and spent the evening processing the surreal experience of public vindication. Emma's bail was set at $500,000. No one posted it. She sat in county jail while her former victims lined up to testify. The casino boyfriend had already flipped, providing evidence in exchange for a lighter sentence. Her house of cards hadn't just fallen, it had exploded into confetti. That night, I wrote what would become my most read blog post. Today, the world learned what I've known for 3 years. I was framed by someone I loved. But here's what matters more than vindication. I didn't wait for the truth to surface. I built my life anyway. I created success from sabotage, family from strangers, and empire from ashes. To everyone living under the shadow of someone else's lies, don't wait for justice. Build your truth so bright that their darkness becomes irrelevant. The best revenge isn't proving them wrong, it's proving yourself right. The post went viral within hours, shared by thousands who'd lived their own versions of false accusation and family betrayal. My inbox flooded with stories of survival, of building beyond, betrayal, of choosing truth over blood when blood chose lies. But the unraveling wasn't complete. Emma's arrest had exposed the rot, but the full excavation of her deceptions would take months. More victims emerged daily. A teacher who'd mentored her, a neighbor who'd hired her for babysitting. Even the family priest discovered she'd stolen from the collection plate while volunteering to count donations. Each revelation felt like another layer of validation and horror. The sister I'd loved, protected, and tried to save had been a predator all along, and I'd simply been her most convenient prey. Yet, as I lay in my comfortable bed in my earned home surrounded by success she'd tried to prevent, I felt something unexpected peace. Not because she was facing justice, but because I'd faced injustice and won anyway. The unraveling of her lies was just confirmation of what I'd already proven. That truth, like Phoenix Marketing's tagline said, rises regardless. Fortune favors the prepared, but sometimes it also provides poetic justice. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning marked urgent from the editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine. They wanted to do a feature story, not just about Phoenix Marketing, but about my entire journey from false accusation to business success. This isn't just a business story, the editor explained during our call. It's about resilience, family betrayal, and ultimate triumph. We want to put you on the cover. The cover of Forbes. 3 years after sleeping in a shelter, my face would be on newsstands nationwide with the headline, "From Homeless to Millionaire, How Claudia Morrison Built an Empire on Truth." The photo shoot felt surreal. Professional stylist designer clothes provided by sponsors eager to be associated with my story. They shot me in our Phoenix offices, surrounded by my team and alone on the rooftop with Denver's skyline behind me. But the photo that made the cover was simple me at my desk, working with the morning light streaming through windows I'd once cleaned for minimum wage. The article's release coincided with Phoenix Marketing landing our biggest client yet, a Fortune 500 company undergoing a complete rebrand. The contract was worth more than Rebirth Digital's entire first-year revenue. Catherine and I celebrated with champagne on the same rooftop where I'd once eaten leftover conference room sandwiches. You know what this means?" Catherine asked, gesturing at the contract spread before us. "You're not just successful. You're undeniably, publicly, irrefutably successful. No one can ever question your worth again." The Forbes feature exploded across social media. My inbox crashed from interview requests, speaking offers, and partnership proposals. Publishers wanted to fast-track my book with a massive advance. Documentary producers called about filming rights. My story of rising from family betrayal had become a cultural moment. Then came the call that shifted power permanently. "Ms. Morrison, this is David Garrett from Garrett Property Holdings. We've been following your story and have an unusual proposal." Garrett Property Holdings owned half of downtown Denver's commercial real estate. David Garrett himself was legendary, a billionaire who'd built his empire from nothing. His calling personally meant something significant. "We're looking to diversify our portfolio into residential properties," he explained. "Specifically, we want to create transitional housing for people escaping abusive situations. Family, domestic, financial. Your story and platform make you the perfect partner. We'd like to acquire properties and have you oversee their transformation into safe spaces for people rebuilding." "That's incredibly generous, but I'm not a real estate developer." "You're something better. You're proof that people can rebuild with the right support. We'll handle the properties and financing. You handle the vision and programs. Think of it as scaling what you've done for yourself to help hundreds of others. The partnership announcement made the business news. Phoenix Marketing would develop and run programs for Phoenix Rising Housing, creating comprehensive support for people whose families had betrayed them. It was my story multiplied into a movement. Margaret learned about my success through the Forbes article. I knew because she stood outside Phoenix Marketing's building for 3 consecutive days, holding a sign that read, "Please forgive me." Security had orders not to let her in, but she persisted rain or shine. Local news picked up the story, "Mother seeks forgiveness after daughter's false accusation." The reporters loved the drama. Successful businesswoman stalked by the mother who'd abandoned her. They interviewed Margaret, who looked hollow and desperate. "I just want 5 minutes," she told the cameras, "to apologize, to explain, to beg if necessary. I chose wrong. I chose the liar over the truth teller, and I'll regret it forever." But I had no interest in her regret. On day 4, I had my lawyer send a cease and desist letter. The woman who'd changed locks to keep me out was now legally barred from approaching my life. Emma watched my rise from a federal detention center. Her public defender reached out about a plea deal suggesting I might provide a character reference for sentencing. The audacity made me laugh. "Tell Emma this is my character reference," I told him. "She's exactly who she showed herself to be, a predator who weaponized family trust. The only tragedy is that it took federal charges for people to believe her victims." The lawyer seemed taken aback. "But she's your sister." "No, she's someone who shared my DNA and used that access to try destroying me. Biology doesn't create obligation to forgive attempted destruction." Emma's trial became a media spectacle. Prosecutors presented evidence of 63 victims over 5 years, showing how she'd refined her techniques with each betrayal. I testified on day 3, calmly recounting how she'd systematically isolated me from support before striking. "Did you ever suspect?" the prosecutor asked. "I suspected she had problems. Gambling addiction, compulsive lying. I tried to help her. That's what she counted on. That I'd always try to save her even as she positioned me for slaughter." "How do you feel about her now?" I looked at Emma for the first time since that night at my launch party. Orange jumpsuit instead of designer clothes. Hollow cheeks from jail food instead of restaurant meals. But the same calculating eyes still looking for angles to exploit. "Oh, I nothing her," I said simply. "She's a consequence playing out, no more significant to my life than a closed chapter in someone else's cautionary tale." Emma's face cracked at that. She'd expected anger, maybe hate, but irrelevance. That was worse than any rage I could have shown. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentence, 15 to 20 years federal prison, plus mandatory restitution to all victims. The girl who'd stolen my family to fund her lifestyle would spend her prime years in a cage. As they led Emma away, she turned back once. "I'm still your sister," she called out. "No," I replied loud enough for the courtroom to hear. "You're just someone who taught me that enemies can share your blood and family can be chosen. Thank you for the lesson." The Forbes article had included a photo of my chosen family. My Phoenix team gathered for a celebration. That image meant more than any childhood portrait Emma had contaminated with her betrayal. These people had seen me at my lowest and invested in my rise. That was family. Phoenix Rising Housing launched with our first property, the same shelter where I'd spent my first homeless nights. We bought it, renovated it, and transformed it into transitional apartments with comprehensive support services. The ribbon-cutting ceremony attracted media attention, but I only cared about the 20 women moving in that day, each escaping their own version of family betrayal. "You survived this place to buy it," Diane said, the woman who'd given me Catherine's card. She'd become our first program director, using her CEO experience to build infrastructure for recovery. That's the kind of power shift that matters. Standing in the renovated building, I thought about power. Emma had thought power meant taking from others. Margaret had thought power meant choosing sides. But real power was building something from nothing, creating opportunities from obstacles, transforming sites of suffering into sources of strength. My phone buzzed with a notification. Another interview request, this one from Oprah's network. I'd become the story everyone wanted. The woman who'd refused to let false accusation define her limits. But more importantly, I'd become the proof others needed that survival could transform into success. 3 years ago, Emma had held all the power. My mother's trust, my family's belief, my professional reputation. She'd controlled it all through lies. Now I owned buildings while she owned a prison number. I commanded respect while she commanded nothing. I built futures while she faced decades of confinement. The power hadn't just shifted, it had revealed its true nature. Power stolen through deception was as temporary as Emma's freedom. Power built through perseverance was as permanent as the foundations I'd laid. That night, I stood on my penthouse balcony. Yes, I'd eventually bought a penthouse because successful women deserve beautiful spaces, and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere Margaret was probably staring at the Forbes cover, wondering how she'd chosen so wrong. Somewhere Emma was learning that federal prison was harder than county jail. And here I was, exactly where they'd tried to prevent me from being at the top, looking down at a view they'd never see, breathing air they'd never reach. The power shift was complete. The storm that would bring everything full circle began forming on an unseasonably warm February morning. I was in Phoenix Rising Housing's third property, reviewing expansion plans with my team when the weather alert flashed across our phones. Unprecedented winter storm warning. Historic blizzard expected within 48 hours. Prepare for extended power outages and dangerous conditions. Denver had seen storms before, but the meteorologists were calling this a once-in-a-generation event. As a business owner with properties housing vulnerable people, I immediately shifted into crisis mode. We had 72 hours to ensure all our residents were prepared for what was coming. Jajin, coordinate with building maintenance to check all backup generators, I ordered. Samantha, contact our food suppliers for emergency provisions. We need 3 weeks of non-perishables in each building. My team scattered to handle preparations. We'd learned from our own experiences that crisis revealed character, and we were determined to protect those who'd already weathered enough storms. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I prepared to shelter others, my phone buzzed with increasingly desperate messages from Margaret. I'd unblocked her number after the trial, not from forgiveness, but from a need to monitor potential threats. Her texts painted a picture of accelerating disaster. Claudia, please, the house is in foreclosure. They've set an eviction date next week. I have nowhere to go. Emma destroyed everything. Your number is the only one that works. Everyone else has blocked me. I deleted each message without response, focusing on the real emergency at hand. Margaret had chosen her side 3 years ago. My responsibility was to the people who'd chosen hope over betrayal. But the universe has a twisted sense of dramatic timing. As the first snow began falling, my security system alerted me to motion at my penthouse building's entrance. The camera showed 2 figures huddled against the growing wind, Margaret, and shocking me to my core, Emma. Emma was out on bail, pending appeal, her lawyer having found some procedural issue that bought her temporary freedom. She looked worse than ever. Gaunt, gray-skinned, wearing a thin jacket entirely inadequate for the approaching blizzard. Margaret beside her seemed to have aged another decade, her once perfect appearance now matching the disaster her life had become. I watched them on the security monitor as they argued with the doorman. Even without audio, I could see their desperation, the way they gestured at the threatening sky, how Emma seemed to collapse against Margaret when he denied them entry. Ma'am, security called through the intercom. They claim to be family. They're asking for shelter from the storm. Should I call the police? My hand hovered over the response button. 3 years ago, they'd changed locks while I begged for 2 more hours. They'd thrown me into a literal storm with nothing but accusations and contempt. Karma had delivered them to my door in their own storm, and all I had to do was repeat their actions. Tell them to try the city shelters, I said finally. They're not welcome here. Through the monitor, I watched security relay the message. Emma's face crumpled while Margaret seemed to shrink into herself. They stood there for another moment before Emma grabbed Margaret's arm, pulling her back into the increasingly violent weather. I returned to storm preparations, but concentration eluded me. The parallel was too perfect, too pointed. They'd cast me out with nothing, and now they stood outside my fortress with less than nothing. The poetry of it should have satisfied me. By evening, the storm had evolved into a monster. Weather reports showed it stalling over Denver, dumping snow at rates that made travel impossible. The city issued shelter-in-place orders. Power grids began failing across neighborhoods, and still Emma and Margaret haunted my thoughts. "You're distracted," Catherine observed during our emergency response meeting. "What's wrong?" I showed her the security footage from earlier. She whistled low. "That's some cosmic justice right there. The storm they threw you into literally returned to collect them." "So why don't I feel satisfied?" "Because you're not them," Diane said quietly. She'd been silent through the meeting, but now fixed me with knowing eyes. "They could abandon you because cruelty came naturally. You're struggling because it doesn't come naturally to you, even when deserved." "I owe them nothing," I said firmly. "No, you don't. But this isn't about them. It's about who you choose to be when you hold all the power." My phone rang. Building security again. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you, but the 2 women from earlier, they're back. They've been sitting in the exterior alcove for hours. With the temperature dropping and the storm, if they stay out there, they'll freeze," I finished. Yes, ma'am, I've suggested alternatives, but they seem broken. The younger one might be experiencing some kind of breakdown. She keeps saying something about deserving to freeze. Should I override and call emergency services?" I looked out my windows at the storm that was reshaping Denver's landscape. Somewhere in that white fury, people I'd once loved were learning what I'd learned 3 years ago. That rock bottom was colder than anyone imagined until they hit it. "Bring them to the lobby," I heard myself say. "Don't let them up, but don't let them freeze either." The relief in security's voice was palpable. "Yes, ma'am, right away." I took the express elevator down each floor, counting down to a confrontation I'd imagined 1,000 times. But in my fantasies, I'd been righteous and vindicated. Now I just felt tired and oddly hollow. The lobby was warm and elegant, all marble and soft lighting, a shocking contrast to the violence outside. Margaret and Emma sat on a bench near security, looking like refugees from their own lives. They didn't see me approach too focused on simply existing in warmth. 15 minutes, I said, causing them both to jump. "That's what you have to convince me why I shouldn't have security escort you back into the storm you once threw me into." Emma lifted her head, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine brokenness. No manipulation, no calculated tears, just the raw exposure of someone who'd burned every bridge, and only now felt the heat. "We're not here to convince you of anything," she said quietly. "We just didn't know where else to go. The shelters are full." Margaret added her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been sleeping in Emma's car, but it broke down this morning. Everything we own is in these bags." She gestured to 2 small duffels, the same kind I'd packed my life into 3 years ago. The parallel was so precise it felt orchestrated. "Why should I care?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "You had no concern for where I slept when you threw me out. Emma was sleeping in my bed that same night, remember, texting me about it while I lay in a shelter cot?" Emma flinched. "I remember everything. Every cruel thing I did. Every lie I told. Prison gave me lots of time to remember." She looked up at me with haunted eyes. Do you know what the worst part was? Not the conviction or the sentence. It was realizing that I destroyed the only person who ever actually tried to help me. Your realization comes 3 years too late. I know. She pulled something from her bag, a worn notebook. I wrote you letters, hundreds of them. My therapist said it would help process what I'd done, but they all sounded like manipulation because that's all I knew how to do. Manipulate, lie, take. I took until there was nothing left, including my own soul. Margaret had been silent, but now she spoke. I chose her. When you begged me to investigate, to believe you, to just consider, you might be telling the truth. I chose her. And when she was exposed, I finally understood why. Why? I asked, despite myself. Because she was easier. Emma told me what I wanted to hear, that you were the problem, that our perfect family was being destroyed by an outsider. It was easier to believe that than to see what we really were. Dysfunctional enablers raising a predator. Margaret's voice broke. I didn't throw out my dishonest daughter. I threw out my honest one, and I've been paying for that choice ever since. The 15 minutes were nearly up. Outside, the storm had reached historic proportions, turning windows into sheets of white. Nothing moved on the streets. The city had shut down, leaving only those with shelter to wait it out. Wait, boss. Jin appeared at my elbow. The emergency management just issued a catastrophic warning. They're saying this storm could last days. Anyone not in shelter now? He trailed off, but the implication was clear. I looked at the women who destroyed my life, now destroyed by their own choices. The smart thing would be to walk away. The just thing would be to let them experience what they'd forced on me. But I'd built Phoenix Rising housing specifically for people escaping family betrayal, and wasn't this in its way the ultimate test of that mission? They were fleeing the family they'd created, one built on lies, manipulation, and chosen blindness. The fact that I was the family they'd betrayed added complexity, not exception. There's a protocol at Phoenix Rising, I said slowly. Emergency admission for those facing life-threatening situations. The storm qualifies. I pulled out my phone, texting Diane. You'll be processed like any other applicants. Background checks, behavioral agreements, program participation requirements. No special treatment because of our history. Less than none, actually. Emma's eyes widened. You're letting us in. I'm allowing you to apply for emergency shelter at one of my properties. Whether you're accepted depends on whether you can follow rules designed to protect other residents from people like you. People like me, Emma repeated quietly. Predators, liars, thieves. Yes. Margaret stood shakily. Claudia, I know we have no right to ask for anything, but thank you for not letting us freeze. Don't thank me. Thank the person I chose to become despite you, and understand this clearly. This isn't forgiveness. It's not reconciliation. It's simply the choice not to become you when I have the power to destroy. I turned to security. Call them a car to Phoenix Rising's intake center. They'll handle it from there. As I walked back to the elevator, Emma called out, Claudia, the notebook. I know you don't want it, but maybe someday. Keep it, I said without turning. Use it to remind yourself who you chose to be and choose differently. The elevator doors closed on the image of them clutching their bags, about to enter the same system I'd navigated 3 years ago, but with a difference. They'd walk in knowing exactly how far they'd fallen and why. No one to blame, no family to manipulate, just the consequences they'd earned. Back in my penthouse, I stood at the windows watching the storm rage. Somewhere in that chaos, Margaret and Emma would be starting their intake process, learning what it meant to be at the mercy of others' kindness. The reckoning had come not through my revenge, but through their own choices catching up. Catherine called. Diane says they arrived. Emma broke down during intake when she realized she'd have to live under the same rules as everyone else. Margaret seemed relieved, like structure was what she'd been missing. Will they make it through the program? Unknown. Diane's putting them in separate buildings, separate programs. Says their codependency needs breaking before any real healing can happen. Emma's going into intensive therapy for personality disorders along with addiction treatment. Margaret's in the senior program with counseling for codependency and enabling behaviors. I processed this information. They'd entered my world, but on my terms. The storm outside would eventually pass, but the one they'd have to weather in recovery would last much longer. You did the right thing, Catherine said softly. I did the only thing I could live with, I corrected. There's a difference between justice and cruelty. They taught me that lesson. I just learned it differently than they intended. That night, as Denver disappeared under record snowfall, I worked on my next book chapter. The title, When Power Reveals Character. It explored how true strength showed not in the ability to destroy those who'd wronged you, but in the choice to remain yourself despite their worst efforts. Emma and Margaret were out there beginning their own journey through the ashes they'd created. Whether they'd rise or remain fallen was their choice now. I'd given them what they denied me, a chance. What they did with it would reveal whether people could truly change or whether some patterns ran too deep to break. The storm raged for 3 more days, reshaping the city's landscape. When it finally passed, Denver emerged transformed, forced to rebuild from the damage. It seemed fitting. We were all rebuilding from storms, some weather-made, others human-crafted. But rebuilding was what phoenixes did best. The historic blizzard that had been forecast arrived with a vengeance that surpassed even the direst predictions. Within hours of Margaret and Emma entering the Phoenix Rising shelter system, Denver transformed into an Arctic wasteland. Snow fell at rates of 4 inches per hour, driven by winds that turned the air into a solid white wall. From my penthouse, I watched the city disappear. Buildings vanished floor by floor until even the nearby high-rises were just gray shadows in the supernatural storm. Power grids failed in cascading waves across neighborhoods. The emergency alert system sent constant updates, each more dire than the last. This is unprecedented. The meteorologist on the emergency broadcast announced, his usual polished demeanor replaced by genuine concern. We're seeing hurricane-force winds combined with Arctic temperatures and snowfall rates that are literally rewriting our record books. If you're not sheltered now, you're in mortal danger. I thought of all the people who'd once been where I was, homeless, desperate, with nowhere safe to weather disaster. My phone rang constantly as my team coordinated emergency responses across all Phoenix Rising properties. We had backup generators, food supplies, and medical support in place. Everyone under our roofs would survive this storm. Boss, we have a problem at Building 2. Jin's voice crackled through the phone, competing with static from the failing cell towers. That's where we placed Emma. She's not adapting well to the rules. Explain. She tried to convince other residents that she deserved special treatment because she's your sister. When that didn't work, she attempted to manipulate a newer resident into giving her their medication. Diane caught it before anything happened, but she's already violating the behavioral agreement she signed 2 hours ago. I finished. Yeah, Diane wants to know how to proceed. Normally, we'd evict someone for attempted medication theft, but with the storm, eviction meant death in these conditions. Even Emma, with all her sins, didn't deserve to freeze to death in a blizzard. But allowing her to prey on vulnerable residents was equally unacceptable. Isolation protocol. I decided. Move her to the secure single room. No interaction with other residents until the storm passes and we can reassess. Make sure she understands this is her last chance. Copy that. Oh, and Boss Margaret's doing surprisingly well. She volunteered to help in the kitchen, been peeling potatoes for 3 hours straight. Hasn't complained once. The contrast was telling. When stripped of everything, Margaret defaulted to service, while Emma defaulted to manipulation. 3 years ago, I'd have been shocked. Now I simply noted it as data about who they really were beneath their roles as mother and daughter. The storm intensified through the night. News reports showed cars buried completely, buildings with windows blown out, people trapped in increasingly desperate situations. The death toll began climbing. Every Phoenix Rising property became an island of safety in an ocean of catastrophe. I worked through the night coordinating with city emergency services, arranging for medical supplies to be snowmobiled to our properties, ensuring every resident had what they needed. This was what power was for. Not revenge, but protection. Not destruction, but construction of safety nets for those who'd fallen. Around 3 a.m., my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was professional but strained. Ms. Morrison, this is Dr. Patricia Wells from Denver Health. I'm sorry to call at this hour, but we have a situation. Emma Morrison was just brought in by emergency services. My blood chilled. What happened? She apparently broke a window in her isolation room and attempted to leave the building. Security caught her, but not before she suffered severe frostbite exposure. She's stable, but Ms. Morrison, she's asking for you. She says she needs to tell you something before... Before what? She's convinced she's dying. The exposure triggered some kind of psychological break. She keeps saying she needs to confess everything before it's too late. I looked out at the storm that showed no signs of weakening. Travel was impossible for civilians, but I had resources now. I'll find a way there. The journey to Denver Health required calling in favors from emergency management contacts. A specialized snow vehicle, typically reserved for critical personnel, carried me through the transformed city. The driver, a veteran of mountain rescues, whistled low as we pushed through drifts that reached the vehicle's windows. "Never seen anything like this in 30 years, he muttered. Your sister's lucky to be alive. 5 more minutes outside and she'd have been a statistic. The hospital was overwhelmed with storm casualties. Frostbite victims' heart attacks from shoveling people who'd lost power and heat. The ER looked like a war zone medical staff, moving with the controlled chaos of those pushed beyond normal limits. I found Emma in a corner bed, her hands wrapped in thick bandages. Frostbite had claimed several fingertips. She'd likely lose them even with treatment. Her face was raw and windburned, but her eyes were alert, focused on me with an intensity that seemed almost feverish. "You came," she whispered. "Dr. Wells said you were asking for me, said you needed to confess something." Emma laughed, a broken sound that turned into coughing. "Not confess, warn. Claudia, I need to warn you about something I did, something that's going to surface soon." "What now, Emma? What other destruction did you leave behind?" "The money, the $73,000 I accused you of stealing." She gripped my hand with her bandaged ones, desperation clear in her touch. "It was never just a lie. I actually stole it from your trust fund before you even knew you had full access." The room seemed to tilt. "That's impossible. The bank would have noticed." "I had help. The boyfriend from the casino, he was more sophisticated than anyone knew. We didn't just attempt identity theft, we succeeded. Multiple times, your trust fund was the first big score." She coughed again, specks of blood appearing on her lips. "But here's what matters. I put it in an account under your name, a shadow account that looks legitimate. When the feds finish their investigation, they'll find it." "You're still trying to frame me, even now." "No." Her grip tightened painfully. "I'm trying to warn you. I thought I was so clever creating evidence that would surface later if you ever fought back. But I'm going to prison Claudia for years. And when that account surfaces, you need to be ready. You need to prove you didn't know about it." I stared at my sister, processing this final betrayal. She'd planted a bomb in my life 3 years ago, set to detonate whenever discovered. Even in destroying me, she'd built in insurance policies. "Where's the account?" "Offshore. Cayman Islands. The credentials are in a safety deposit box at First National under the name Claire Mitchell. That was gonna be your alias when I revealed it all. She started crying, the tears seeming to surprise her. I was so proud of how thorough I was. So sure I'd thought of everything. Except I never thought I'd care about warning you. Why do you care now? Emma was quiet for a long moment, the only sounds the beeping of machines and distant chaos of the emergency room. Finally, because I've lost everything, every relationship, every penny, every piece of myself I traded for the con. But watching you rise, Claudia, you built something real, something that matters. And maybe if I help protect that, if I do one decent thing, maybe I won't be completely worthless. You're not seeking redemption, Emma. You're seeking relevance. There's a difference. I know. She released my hand, sinking back into the pillows. I know I can't undo anything. Can't earn forgiveness. Can't fix what I broke, but I can give you information. The box number is 47. The password is Dad's birthday backwards. The account has grown to about 90,000 with interest. Document everything, get ahead of it, and maybe you can keep the life you built. A nurse appeared checking Emma's vitals with efficient movements. She needs rest. The exposure was severe and there might be internal damage we haven't found yet. I stood to leave, but Emma caught my sleeve. Claudia, I know you'll never forgive me. I don't forgive myself, but thank you for not letting me freeze, even after everything. I didn't do it for you, I said quietly. I did it because I refuse to become someone who lets people freeze when I have the power to offer shelter. Don't mistake principle for mercy. Outside her room, Dr. Wells pulled me aside. The frostbite damage is extensive. She'll likely lose several fingers, possibly some toes. The psychological evaluation suggests severe personality disorders compounded by trauma. She'll need extensive treatment. She's getting it through our program. Whatever medical care she needs, Phoenix Rising will cover it. The doctor's eyebrows rose. That's generous considering the circumstances. It's not generous, it's consistent. We help people rebuild from family betrayal. The fact that she's the family who betrayed me doesn't change our mission. It just makes it more complicated. The ride back through the still raging storm gave me time to process Emma's warning. Another trap planted years ago waiting to destroy what I'd built. But this time, I had resources, lawyers, and most importantly, forewarning. Her confession, whether motivated by genuine regret or desperate relevance, had given me power over her final manipulation. Back at my penthouse, I called Samantha immediately. We have a problem. Emma planted evidence of embezzlement in offshore accounts under my name. We need to get ahead of this. On it, Samantha said without hesitation. I'll contact the FBI first thing. If we self-report and cooperate fully, we can control the narrative. Do you have details? I relayed Emma's information and we strategized until dawn. By the time the storm showed its first signs of weakening, we had a plan. The irony wasn't lost on me. Emma's final trap would become evidence of her sophisticated planning, further proving my innocence in the original accusations. Through my windows, I watched the city begin to dig out. The storm had paralyzed Denver for 4 days, leaving behind transformed landscapes and statistics that would make history. But we'd survived. All of us, even those who might not have deserved to. Margaret remained at Phoenix Rising quietly, working in the kitchen, attending therapy, following every rule with the dedication of someone who'd finally found structure. Emma would return after her hospital stay minus several digits, but alive to face her consequences and maybe, possibly change. And I would continue building now, aware of the last bomb Emma had planted, able to defuse it before it detonated. The storm had arrived in multiple forms: meteorological, familial, financial. But storms always passed, leaving behind either destruction or fertile ground for new growth. I chose growth. I always had. That was the difference between us. I built while they destroyed, even when destroying themselves in the process. The sun broke through the clouds as the blizzard finally exhausted itself, revealing a Denver buried, but not broken. Like all of us who'd weathered storms, the city would dig out, rebuild, and emerge stronger. It's what phoenixes do. 2 weeks after the historic blizzard, Denver had mostly dug itself out. The city wore its scars, downed trees, damaged buildings, and stories of both tragedy and triumph. Phoenix Rising housing had become a media darling, our successful sheltering of hundreds during the storm, earning recognition from the governor himself. I was reviewing expansion proposals when my assistant knocked. "Ms. Morrison, there are 2 women in the lobby claiming to be family. Security followed protocol and didn't let them up, but they're persistent." On my monitor, I pulled up the lobby feed. Margaret and Emma stood at the security desk, but they looked nothing like the desperate refugees from the storm. Margaret wore professional attire, probably from the Phoenix Rising clothing bank, her posture straight and purposeful. Emma was harder to recognize, not just because of the bandages still covering her damaged hands, but because her entire demeanor had changed. The predatory confidence was gone, replaced by something raw and uncertain. "They've been here for 2 hours," my assistant continued. "They say they have something important to discuss with you. Should I have security remove them?" I studied the feed. This wasn't desperation driving them now. The storm had passed. Their basic needs were met through our programs. Whatever brought them here was something else entirely. "Send them to conference room C," I decided. "I'll see them there." The conference room was deliberately chosen. Glass walls that let my team see everything, recording equipment for legal protection, and a setting that was professional rather than personal. I wasn't meeting family. I was meeting program participants who happened to share my DNA. They entered hesitantly, Margaret clutching a manila folder while Emma kept her bandaged hands carefully at her sides. The damage was evident. She'd lost 3 fingertips to frostbite the remaining digits, still wrapped in protective gauze. "Sit," I said, gesturing to chairs across the table. "You have 10 minutes to explain why you're here." Margaret spoke first, her voice steady but careful. "We've been in your programs for 2 weeks now, attending therapy, following rules, working through everything." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "The therapeutic process has been enlightening. Painful, but enlightening." "I'm glad the programs are helping," I said neutrally. Emma leaned forward. "That's not why we're here. Claudia, we discovered something. About the money, the theft, the whole foundation of what I did to you." She exchanged glances with Margaret. "It was all based on a lie that goes deeper than my personal manipulations." "Explain." Margaret opened the folder, spreading documents across the table. "During therapy, I was encouraged to review financial records to understand how I'd enabled Emma's behaviors. So I requested full bank histories, investment accounts, everything from the past decade. That's when I found these." The documents showed investment account statements I didn't recognize. The names were familiar, variations of our family members, but the accounts themselves were new to me. "Your father," Margaret said quietly, "was stealing from his own family for years before he died." The room seemed to tilt. "What?" "He set up shadow investment accounts using family members' information. Small amounts siphoned from various sources. His mother's estate, his siblings' joint ventures, even our children's college funds. He hid it brilliantly, using his position at the bank to cover tracks." Emma picked up the narrative. "When I started my activities, I accidentally discovered some of these accounts. I thought they were opportunities, not evidence of Dad's crimes. I learned my techniques by reverse engineering his methods." I stared at the documents, seeing patterns I wished I couldn't recognize. The sophistication Emma had shown, the knowledge of banking systems, the ability to create convincing false documentation. She'd learned it all from our father's hidden crimes. "He stole over $500,000 over 15 years. Margaret continued, tears sliding down her cheeks. From his own mother, Claudia, from his siblings, from us. The man we mourned, the father you idolized, was a thief who taught his daughter to be an even better one. Why are you telling me this? My voice came out strangled. Emma met my eyes directly because in therapy, I'm learning about accountability. Real accountability, not the performance I've done my whole life. And part of that is acknowledging that I chose to follow his example instead of yours. You were right there, showing me integrity, offering help, being the person Dad pretended to be. And I chose to be like him instead. The $73,000 I accused you of stealing, she continued. It was from one of Dad's hidden accounts I'd found and drained. I created the entire elaborate lie to cover for taking money that was already stolen. Theft upon theft upon theft, all the way back to the man who was supposed to teach us right from wrong. Margaret pushed another document forward. This is a full accounting of what we've found so far. Your father's thefts, Emma's thefts, and my complicity in enabling both through willful blindness. We're providing copies to the FBI as part of Emma's cooperation agreement. I picked up one of the statements, my hands trembling slightly. There was my grandmother's name on an account my father controlled, thousands of dollars marked as investments that had actually funded his gambling habits. The parallel to Emma was so precise it felt like looking at a genetic blueprint for betrayal. You want to know the sick part? Emma laughed bitterly. I actually thought I was honoring him, following in his footsteps. Turns out his footsteps led straight to destruction, just like mine did. So what do you want from me? I asked, setting down the papers. Absolution because you had a criminal role model understanding because dysfunction runs in our family. No, Margaret said firmly. We want you to have the truth, all of it, so you can make informed decisions about your own life, your own story, the book you're writing, the speeches you give. You deserve to know the full context of the family that betrayed you. Emma shifted uncomfortably. And we wanted to warn you. Some of Dad's victims are still alive, his siblings' business partners. When this comes out through the investigation, they might come after his estate, such as it is. You could be caught in that crossfire. I don't want anything from his estate, I said immediately. We know, but legally you might not have a choice. Lawsuits get messy, especially when they involve family fraud going back decades. Emma held up her bandaged hands. I'm facing 15 to 20 years in prison. Mom's probably going to lose everything she has left to lawsuits. But you built something clean, something separate from our poison. We wanted to make sure you could protect it. I studied them across the table. Two women who destroyed my life, now trying to, protect me, warn me, make amends. The motivations were too tangled to parse, but the information was valuable. Is this all of it? I asked. Every secret, every lie, every hidden account. Everything we found, Margaret confirmed. But Claudia, there might be more. Your father was very clever, and Emma learned from the best. We're still uncovering layers. I documented everything, Emma added quietly, just like Dad did. My therapist says it's a compulsion needing to record our crimes like trophies, but it means there's a complete record. Every person I stole from, every method I used, every lesson I learned from his example, it's all being turned over to authorities. The 10 minutes had long passed, but I found myself unable to end the meeting. The revelation about my father recontextualized everything, not excusing it, but explaining patterns I'd never understood. He used to quiz me, Emma said suddenly, about banking procedures, security questions, how to talk to customer service reps. I thought it was father-daughter bonding, him sharing his work world, but he was training me, and I was too young and stupid to see it. While he taught me about integrity, I said slowly, about hard work and honesty and protecting family. Because you were like Mom, Emma replied. Too honest to be useful for his real work, so he made you the cover story, the good daughter who proved he was raising us right while he turned me into his apprentice. Margaret had been quiet, but now she spoke. I suspected. Deep down, I think I knew something was wrong, but I chose comfort over truth, just like I did with Emma. It's a pattern I'm only now seeing in therapy, choosing the easy lie over the difficult truth no matter who it destroys. And now? I asked. Now I'm in a studio apartment paid for by the job I got through Phoenix Rising's program. I work in the cafeteria at a local school serving lunch to children. It's honest work for honest pay, and I sleep better than I have in years. She met my eyes. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I'm trying to become someone who does deserve the second chance you gave me. Emma nodded. I'll be in prison soon. Real prison, not county jail, but I'll go knowing I finally told the complete truth about something. No angles, no manipulations, just truth. It's strange, uncomfortable, but maybe that's what change feels like. I gathered the documents they'd brought, adding them to my ever-growing file of family revelations. I'll have my lawyers review these. If there are legal implications, we'll handle them. As for the rest, I paused, choosing my words carefully. Thank you for the information. It helps to understand the patterns, even if it doesn't change the outcomes. They stood to leave, but I had one more question. The notebook, the one you mentioned at the hospital, do you still have it? Emma reached into her bag, pulling out a worn composition notebook. 400 pages of letters I'll never send. Apologies that sound like manipulation because that's all I knew how to do. But maybe someday I'll learn to write one real letter. One that's just truth, no agenda. When you do, I said, surprising myself, send it to Phoenix Rising. I won't promise to read it, but I won't throw it away unopened either. Margaret paused at the door. Claudia, the woman you became despite us. She's extraordinary. I just wanted you to know that someone sees it, even if that someone forfeited the right to matter. They left quietly, no dramatic exits or emotional pleas. I sat in the empty conference room staring at evidence of generational betrayal. My father, the man whose watch I'd treasured, whose integrity I'd tried to emulate, had been the original thief in a family of thieves. But I wasn't him, wasn't Emma, wasn't even Margaret with her enabling blindness. I was the anomaly, the one who'd broken the pattern by refusing to perpetuate it. The phoenix who'd risen not despite my family, but because of them. Because their betrayal had freed me to become who I really was. My assistant knocked. Your 3 o'clock is here, the documentary crew. Send them in, I said, standing and smoothing my jacket. We have a story to tell. And now, finally, I knew the whole story. Not just my chapter, but the entire book of dysfunction that had preceded it. It didn't change my rise, but it explained the ashes I'd risen from. Generations of theft and lies stopped by one daughter who'd chosen truth, even when it cost her everything. The documentary would tell part of it. My book would tell more, but the most important chapter was the one I was living. Proof that patterns could be broken, that phoenixes could rise, that sometimes the greatest revenge against a legacy of lies was simply living your truth. The knock at my door had brought answers to questions I hadn't known to ask. But more importantly, it had shown me that Margaret and Emma were finally starting to ask the right questions of themselves. Whether they'd find redemption remained to be seen, but at least they were looking in the right direction. Inward, where all real change began. The documentary crew had been filming for 3 weeks when the inevitable happened. They wanted to capture a confrontation between me and my family, the kind of dramatic moment that would guarantee viral clips and Emmy considerations. I'd refused repeatedly, but fate had other plans. I was filming at the original Phoenix Rising building, the converted shelter where my journey had begun, when my assistant called with urgency in her voice. Claudia, we have a situation. Emma left the facility without authorization. Security cameras show her heading toward your location. When? 20 minutes ago. And Claudia. Margaret left her workplace at the same time. They might be together. The film crew's director, Marcus, overheard and practically salivated at the possibility. This could be incredible footage, real, raw family dynamics. This isn't entertainment, I snapped. This is my life. But even as I spoke, I saw them through the window. Emma and Margaret approached the building with determined steps, no longer the broken women who'd sought shelter in a blizzard. Emma's bandaged hands were hidden in her pockets, while Margaret carried herself with newfound dignity from weeks of honest work. Lock the doors, I told security. They're not authorized to be here. But Emma had learned too much about our security protocols during her stay. She knew the emergency exits, the blind spots, the shift changes. Within minutes, she and Margaret had somehow entered through a service door appearing in the main lobby where I stood with the film crew. The cameras were already rolling. Marcus made subtle gestures to his team to keep filming despite my glare. This was the content they'd dreamed of. The confrontation between betrayer and betrayed, all captured in cinematic quality. You need to leave, I said immediately. You're violating your program agreements by being here. Emma stepped forward, and I noticed something different about her posture. The predatory calculation was gone, but so was the broken devastation. She looked resolved. I'm going to prison tomorrow, she said simply. Transport leaves at 6 a.m., 15 to 20 years. I'll be in my 40s when I get out if I survive that long. That's not my concern. No, it's not. But before I go, I needed to say something. Not for forgiveness or redemption or any of the things you rightfully won't give, but because someone needs to hear the truth from my mouth, not read it in court documents. Margaret stood beside her, silent but present. The cameras captured every moment, but I found I didn't care. Let the world see this. Let them understand what family betrayal really looked like beneath the headlines. Speak your truth, then, I said. You have 3 minutes. Emma took a breath, her damaged hands emerging from her pockets. The missing fingertips were still bandaged, permanent reminders of her attempt to flee consequences. I destroyed you because I could, she began, her voice steady. Not because I needed money. I had access to plenty through Dad's hidden accounts. Not because I was desperate. I was just greedy. I destroyed you because you were good, and your goodness made me feel like the fraud I was. The words hung in the air between us. Behind the cameras, I sensed the crew holding their breath. Every time you helped me, every time you showed integrity, every time you chose honesty over easy lies, you held up a mirror to what I really was. And instead of changing, I decided to shatter the mirror. Emma's voice cracked slightly. I spent 6 months planning your destruction. 6 months smiling at you over breakfast while documenting ways to frame you. I practiced crying in the mirror to make sure my performance would be perfect when I accused you. Emma and Margaret said warningly, but Emma shook her head. No, Mom, she deserves to hear this. Claudia, I kept a spreadsheet. An actual spreadsheet of your vulnerabilities, your trusting nature rated on a scale of 1 to 10 for exploitability, your work schedule to find the perfect alibi gaps, your passwords gathered from watching you type, your emotional triggers documented like a scientific experiment. My stomach churned, but I kept my face neutral. The cameras captured everything, but this wasn't performance. This was truth so ugly it could only be real. The night you were thrown out, Emma continued, I had champagne chilling in my mini fridge. I celebrated while you slept in your car. I took photos of myself in your bed and sent them to friends laughing about how I'd upgraded rooms. I felt powerful, like I'd won some cosmic game. Is there a point to this confession? I asked coldly. The point is that I was a monster. Not misguided, not sick, not struggling with addiction. A monster who chose monstrosity because it was easier than becoming human. Emma met my eyes directly, and you need to know that nothing you did caused it. No amount of kindness would have changed it. No different choices would have prevented it. I was a parasite, and parasites destroy their hosts. It's their nature. Margaret finally spoke. What Emma's trying to say is that we've learned in therapy about accountability versus explanation. Our father's crimes explain how Emma learned her techniques, but they don't excuse her choices. Just like my enabling explains my blindness, but doesn't excuse my abandonment of you. You threw me away, I said to Margaret, surprising myself with the emotion in my voice. Your own daughter, based on lies so obvious that any real investigation would have exposed them in hours. You chose to believe tears over truth. Yes, Margaret said simply, I chose the easy lie over the hard truth. I chose the daughter who told me what I wanted to hear over the daughter who told me what I needed to hear. And I've been paying for that choice every day since. The confrontation I'd avoided for years was happening in front of cameras being recorded for posterity, but somehow that felt right. Let the world see what betrayal looked like without Instagram filters or carefully curated narratives. Do you know what the hardest part was? I asked, addressing both of them. It wasn't the homelessness or the hunger or the humiliation. It was the gaslighting, being told I was crazy for maintaining my innocence, being called delusional for insisting on truth. You didn't just steal my family and home, you tried to steal my reality. Emma nodded. We did. I crafted a false reality so convincing that everyone believed it over your truth. And when you refused to accept that false reality, we labeled you as mentally ill. It's a tactic I learned from Dad, actually. He always said the best lies were the ones that made the truth teller look unstable. Your father, I said slowly, was a criminal who trained a criminal, but I was his daughter too. Why didn't he train me? Because you were Mom's child, Emma said. He saw it early. Your integrity, your inability to lie convincingly, your need to help rather than take. He told me once that you were too pure for the family business. I thought he meant banking. The film crew shifted positions, getting better angles, but I no longer cared about their presence. This conversation had been 3 years in the making. I'm not pure, I said firmly. I'm just not corrupt. There's a difference between goodness and simply refusing to be evil. You're right, Emma agreed. And that refusal is what I couldn't break. God, I tried. Even from prison, I'll probably still have moments where I want to find some way to hurt you, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your existence proves that I chose to be this way. Every success you have reminds me that I could have chosen differently. Could you have, I challenged, or were you always going to be what Dad molded you to be? Emma considered this. I'll have 15 to 20 years to figure that out, but I know this. I made choices, thousands of them, and each one led me here, about to be caged like the predator I became, while you made different choices that led you there free and successful and surrounded by people who trust you because you're trustworthy. Marcus, the director, couldn't contain himself anymore. This is powerful, raw, real. Would you consider sitting down for a formal interview together? The 3 of you. No, I said immediately. This moment isn't content. It's closure, or as close to closure as we'll get. I looked at Margaret and Emma, really seeing them for perhaps the first time. Not as the mother who'd failed me, or the sister who'd destroyed me, but as flawed humans who'd chosen destruction and were finally facing the rubble. I don't forgive you, I said clearly. I may never forgive you, but I acknowledge your truth-telling today. It doesn't undo anything, but it does complete the record. Emma reached into her bag one final time, pulling out a sealed envelope. For your files, every password, every hidden account, every crime I committed in your name that might surface later. My lawyers have copies, but I wanted you to have it directly from me. No more surprises, no more bombs waiting to explode. I took the envelope without touching her hand. And after prison, what then? I don't know, Emma admitted. Maybe I'll still be a monster. Maybe prison will make me worse. Or maybe I'll use the time to actually change, to become someone who adds to the world instead of taking from it. Either way, you'll have built an empire while I'm behind bars. The results speak for themselves. Margaret stepped forward slightly. Claudia, I know I have no right to ask, but would you let me know how you're doing sometimes? Not directly, but through Phoenix Rising updates, just to know you're okay. You can follow the public social media accounts like anyone else, I said. But Margaret, my life isn't your concern anymore. You made that choice 3 years ago when you changed the locks. She nodded, accepting the boundary. I understand. I wanted you to know that I see you now, really see you, and I'm proud of who you became despite us. Because of you, I corrected. I became who I am because of you. Your betrayal freed me from trying to earn love that was conditional on convenience. Emma's lies taught me to trust my own truth, regardless of who disputed it. You were the worst thing that happened to me, and accidentally, the best. Emma laughed, a sound devoid of humor. We were your villain origin story, except you became a hero instead. That's the part that kills me. We gave you every reason to become like us, and you chose the opposite direction. Yes, I said simply. I did. Security appeared at the lobby entrance. My real team, not the skeleton crew Emma had evaded. Ma'am, should we escort them out? I looked at my mother and sister one last time. Tomorrow, Emma would be in federal prison. Margaret would continue her quiet work in the school cafeteria, serving honest meals for honest pay. And I would continue building Phoenix Rising, expanding our reach to help more people escape family betrayal. Yes, I said, escort them out. Their business here is finished. As security led them away, Emma turned back one final time. Claudia, thank you for not becoming us. Someone had to break the pattern. They left quietly, no dramatic scene, no tears or pleas. The film crew stood in stunned silence, processing what they'd captured. Marcus looked at me with something approaching awe. He started. That was 3 years overdue. I finished. Now let's get back to work. We have a documentary to finish about rising from ashes, not wallowing in them. But as we returned to filming, I kept the envelope Emma had given me. One more piece of evidence in a file that now told the complete story. Generational crime, systematic betrayal, and one daughter who'd refused to continue the cycle. The confrontation had happened on my terms in my space, with my truth witnessed and recorded. Let Emma have her prison cell and Margaret her quiet penance. I had an empire to run and people to help who deserved more than betrayal disguised as blood. The cameras rolled on, capturing the story of Phoenix Rising. But the real story, the one about choosing who you become regardless of who tried to destroy you, that story was written in every choice I made to build rather than burn. Emma's transfer to federal prison happened at dawn, exactly as scheduled. I didn't go to see her off, but Diane called me afterward with a report. Emma had walked to the transport van with her head high, wearing the dignity of someone who'd finally stopped running from consequences. Margaret had been there standing in the cold morning air, watching her youngest daughter disappear into a system that would hold her for decades. She didn't cry, Diane told me. Neither of them did. It was like watching people who'd finally accepted reality. I processed this information while reviewing architectural plans for Phoenix Rising's newest property. We were converting an abandoned hotel into transitional housing, creating homes from ruins. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. 3 days later, Margaret appeared at my office again, but this time she followed proper channels. She scheduled an appointment through my assistant, waited in the lobby when she arrived early, and entered only when invited. The difference from her past entitled behavior was striking. Thank you for seeing me. She began, sitting carefully in the chair across from my desk. I know I have no right to your time. You have 5 minutes, I said, setting a timer on my phone. What do you need? Margaret pulled out a folder, her hand steady, despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. I've been working with a forensic accountant, someone Phoenix Rising recommended to help untangle my finances. We found more. She spread documents across my desk, bank statements, property deeds, investment portfolios, all in names I didn't recognize, but with connections to our family that were unmistakable. Your father didn't just steal money, she said quietly. He stole identities, entire identities, created fake people using combinations of family members' information. Some of these people own property, have credit histories, even paid taxes. I studied the papers, my mind reeling at the scope of the fraud. How did no one notice? Because he was brilliant, and because he worked at the bank that handled most of these accounts. He had inside access, knew exactly how to make everything look legitimate. Margaret's voice carried a mixture of awe and disgust. The forensic accountant says it's one of the most sophisticated long-term fraud schemes she's ever seen. Why are you showing me this? Because some of these properties and accounts are technically yours. He used your social security number, your birth date variations of your name. There's a woman named Claudette Morrison who owns a cabin in Vail. Another named Clara Morrison with an investment portfolio worth $200,000. I pushed the papers back toward her. I don't want any of it. It's all built on theft. The FBI will need to know your position. The accountant says you could claim ignorance and potentially keep some assets, or you could disclaim everything and ensure you're seen as another victim rather than a beneficiary. Disclaim it all, I said immediately. Every penny, every property, every fake identity he created using my information. I want nothing that came from his crimes. Margaret nodded, making notes. The accountant said you'd say that. She also said it's the smart choice. Clean break from any potential liability. It's not about liability, it's about integrity. I built Phoenix Rising with my own hands, my own work, my own truth. I won't contaminate that with his stolen gains. She gathered the papers slowly. You know what I've realized in therapy. Your father and I were perfect for each other. He was actively corrupt while I was passively complicit. He stole while I looked away. He trained Emma while I enabled her. We were a matched set of dysfunction. And I was the anomaly. No, Margaret said firmly. You were the miracle. Somehow in the middle of our toxic dynamic, you grew straight and strong. I used to think it was despite us. Now I think maybe it was because of us. Maybe seeing what not to be taught you what to be. The timer on my phone chimed. 5 minutes exactly. But Margaret didn't move to leave. Instead, she pulled out one more document. There's one more thing. I'm selling the house. The one you grew up in. The one I threw you out of. Old pain flickered through me before I could stop it. That house had been home until it became the site of my execution. The market's good. Even with the second mortgage Emma forged, there's equity. About $300,000 after all debts are paid. She looked directly at me. I want to donate it to Phoenix Rising. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. What? The house where I chose lies over truth. Where I betrayed my honest daughter for my dishonest one. Where I changed the locks on love and called it justice. Her voice remained steady despite the weight of the words. That house should become something better. Maybe shelter someone who needs what I denied you, a safe place to land when family fails them. Margaret, that's significant money. You need resources for your own future. I have a job, a small apartment, Medicare in a few years. I don't need blood money from a house built on my husband's theft and maintained by my willful blindness. She pushed the donation papers across the desk. Please, let me transform the site of your betrayal into someone else's salvation. I stared at the papers. The house I'd been exiled from offered back not as personal restitution, but as community resource. It was poetic in a way that felt almost orchestrated. There would be conditions, I said slowly. The donation goes through Phoenix Rising's board, not directly to me. You receive no special recognition or naming rights, and you understand this doesn't buy forgiveness or relationship. I understand. I'm not trying to buy anything. I'm trying to... She paused, searching for words. I'm trying to choose correctly for once. To pick truth over comfort, even when the truth is that I destroyed something precious and can never get it back. I called my assistant to bring in the Phoenix Rising legal team. Within an hour, the paperwork was drafted, reviewed, and signed. The house, where I'd lost everything, would become transitional housing for others who'd lost everything. The irony was sharp enough to cut. As Margaret prepared to leave, she paused at my office door. "I know you follow Emma's case. Her lawyer says she's adjusting to prison better than expected. Joined a program to get her GED since she lied about finishing college, too. Good for her." She writes, "Not letters to anyone, just processing. The prison counselor says it's healthy. Apparently, she's working on something she calls the anatomy of a con artist, a sort of autobiography of how she became what she became." "Maybe it'll help others avoid creating an Emma," I said neutrally. Margaret studied me for a long moment. "You know what the hardest part is? I can see now what I threw away. Not just a daughter, but the daughter who would have stood by me through anything honest. The one who would have helped me face truth instead of hiding in lies. I traded gold for pyrite and called myself clever." "Yes," I said simply, "you did." She left without another word, dignity intact despite the weight of her choices. I sat in my office staring at the donation papers for the house that had once been home. By next month, it would be gutted and renovated, transformed into 6 studio apartments for people escaping family betrayal. The walls that had witnessed my destruction would shelter others' reconstruction. My phone rang, Diane with updates on other residents' new admissions, the daily business of building phoenixes from ashes. But my mind stayed on choices. Emma choosing prison over freedom rather than face her crimes. Margaret choosing truth over comfort 3 years too late. Me choosing to build rather than burn. And now the choice to transform the site of my betrayal into someone else's beginning. To take a house poisoned by lies and make it a home for truth seekers. To prove that places like people could be redeemed through purpose. That night, I drove past the house for the first time since my exile. It looked smaller than memory suggested, ordinary in the way that sites of personal catastrophe often do. Soon it would be scaffolded and transformed. But for now, it was just a house where a family had lived and died through their own choices. I didn't stop, didn't linger in nostalgia or bitterness. I had work to do, an empire to run, people to help who deserved more than I'd gotten. The choice to transform rather than destroy was made daily, hourly, with every decision to build rather than burn. Emma had made her choice and would live it out in a federal cell. Margaret had made her choice and would live it out in honest labor and donated equity. And I had made my choice long ago in a shelter bunk, deciding that being betrayed didn't mean becoming betrayer. The choices were made. Now all that remained was living them out one day at a time, one phoenix at a time, one transformed life at a time. Including my own. 1 year later, almost to the day after the blizzard that had brought everything full circle, I stood in the transformed remains of my childhood home. What had once been a single-family monument to dysfunction now housed 6 studio apartments, each occupied by someone escaping family betrayal. The walls were new, the layout completely reimagined, but I could still feel the echoes of what had transpired here. "The dedication ceremony starts in 20 minutes, Diane informed me, clipboard in hand. She'd become Phoenix Rising's chief operations officer, her CEO skills perfectly suited to scaling our mission. "The governor's here along with 3 news crews and about 200 supporters." Through the window, I could see the crowd gathering on what used to be our front lawn. Among them, I spotted Margaret in her cafeteria uniform, having come straight from work. She stood at the edges, respecting the boundaries I'd set while still bearing witness to what her donated house had become. "Your speech is loaded in the teleprompter," Diane continued, "but knowing you, you'll probably speak from the heart anyway." She was right. The prepared remarks felt insufficient for this moment. How could I capture the journey from being thrown out of this house to owning the company that had transformed it, from sleeping in shelters to providing shelter for others? The documentary had aired 6 months ago to critical acclaim and viral success. Phoenix Rising. A story of betrayal and triumph had won 3 Emmys and sparked a national conversation about family financial abuse. The footage of my confrontation with Emma and Margaret had indeed become the powerful centerpiece Marcus hoped for. But more importantly, it had given voice to thousands who'd experienced similar betrayals. My book had spent 16 weeks on the bestseller list. The speaking engagements were constant, each audience filled with people who'd found hope in proof that betrayal didn't equal defeat. Phoenix Rising had expanded to 12 cities with federal funding secured for 20 more locations. We were becoming what I dreamed. Not just a company, but a movement. Ma'am. A young woman appeared at the door, one of our newest residents. I just wanted to thank you. When my family stole my identity and ruined my credit, I thought my life was over. But being here in this program, I'm in college now. I have a job. I have hope. You have yourself, I corrected gently. We just provided space for you to rebuild. You did the work. She smiled and returned to her apartment, the one that used to be my bedroom. I'd insisted on that allocation, knowing someone deserved to write a better story in that space than the one I'd lived. Diane and I made our way outside where the ceremony was beginning. The crowd was diverse. Former residents who'd rebuilt their lives, current residents just starting their journeys, supporters who believed in our mission, and media eager to capture the story of transformation. I took the podium, looking out at faces both familiar and unknown. In the back row, I saw Catherine beaming with pride. Jin and Javier held hands in the middle section. Samantha stood with other Phoenix Rising board members, my chosen family multiplied by hundreds who'd become family through shared purpose. 4 years ago, I began ignoring the teleprompter entirely. I was thrown out of this house with nothing but false accusations and 2 bags of clothes. My mother chose to believe lies over truth. My sister chose to destroy rather than heal, and I chose to survive. The crowd was silent, attentive. Margaret remained at the edges, her face composed but clearly emotional. But survival isn't enough. It's just the first step. After survival comes rebuilding. After rebuilding comes thriving. And after thriving comes the most important stage, reaching back to help others climb. I gestured to the building behind me. This house, which once sheltered betrayal, now shelters healing. These walls, which once witnessed my exile, now witness new beginnings every day. I spoke about transformation, about choosing to build rather than burn, about the power of turning pain into purpose. The speech flowed naturally, born from lived experience rather than prepared remarks. Someone asked me recently if I forgive my family for what they did. I continued, knowing Margaret could hear every word. Forgiveness is complex, but what I can say is this: I'm grateful. Grateful that their betrayal forced me to discover my own strength. Grateful that losing fake family led me to find real community. Grateful that being stripped of everything showed me I could build anything. The applause was warm, genuine. As I left the podium, other speakers took turns. Residents sharing their stories, board members announcing expansion plans, the governor praising our model as revolutionary approach to social services. During the reception, I found myself standing in what used to be our kitchen. The industrial cooking equipment for communal meals had replaced Mom's ceramic coffee pot and family dinner table. It felt right. Nourishment over performance, genuine care over false harmony. "It's beautiful," a voice said behind me. I turned to find Margaret maintaining respectful distance, but having found courage to approach. She looked older, but somehow more solid, as if honest work had given her substance that privilege never had. "The residents love it," I replied neutrally. "It's becoming real community here." "That's what it always should have been." She studied the transformed space. "I cook for 200 children every day now. Simple food, honest work. I think about you every time I serve them." Why? Because they trust me to nourish them, the way you trusted me to nourish you. And I remember how I failed that trust, choosing poison over food, lies over love. She met my eyes directly. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I understand now what I threw away, who I threw away, through. Before I could respond, she walked away, returning to the edges of the crowd where she belonged. I watched her go, feeling something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a loosening of anger that had served its purpose and could now be released. The afternoon continued with tours of the facility, meetings with potential donors, interviews with media. Through it all, I kept thinking about cycles and choices patterns and phoenix rises. That evening, after everyone had gone, I stood alone in the backyard where Emma and I had played as children. The swing set was gone, replaced by a meditation garden for residents. But if I closed my eyes, I could still hear echoes of laughter from when we were young, before she learned to lie and I learned to survive her lies. My phone buzzed with a notification from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Emma had completed her GED and enrolled in college courses. She'd also submitted her first published article to the prison newsletter, a piece about accountability that the warden thought I should see. I read it standing there in the gathering dusk. It was raw, honest in a way Emma had never been when free. She wrote about growing up in a house of lies, choosing to become the chief liar and the price of that choice. She didn't excuse or minimize, just documented with the same thoroughness she'd once applied to her cons. The article ended with a line that stopped me cold. I spent my life stealing from others, but the person I robbed most thoroughly was myself, of the chance to be someone my sister could trust, someone my mother could honestly be proud of, someone I could face in the mirror without flinching. That's a theft I can never make restitution for, only acknowledge and refuse to repeat. I saved the article to the file that had grown thick with documentation of our family's journey from betrayal to whatever this was now. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, but something more complex. Transformation through truth, even when that truth came too late to restore what was broken. A text arrived from Catherine, celebration dinner. The whole Phoenix team wants to toast your success. I smiled, pocketing my phone. My real family was waiting, the one built on trust, rather than blood choice, rather than chance. As I walked through the house one last time, I touched the walls that had witnessed both my destruction and reconstruction. Tomorrow, residents would continue their journeys here, writing new stories over old pain. But tonight was for celebrating with people who'd believed in me when I had nothing but determination and a refusal to let betrayal define my limits. The empire wasn't just the buildings or the programs or the national recognition. It was the network of souls who'd chosen to rise together, proving that sometimes the best families are the ones you build from ashes. As I locked up and headed to my car, I saw a Phoenix Rising van arriving with a new resident. Another person whose family had failed them, another chance for transformation, another story beginning where mine had almost ended. The cycle continued, but it was a cycle of rising, not falling. Emma was right in her article. She'd stolen from herself most of all, but I'd been given something through her theft, the chance to discover who I really was when everything false was stripped away. And who I was, it turned out, was exactly who I was meant to be. The phoenix who rose not despite the ashes, but because of them. The woman who built an empire on the radical principle that betrayal was not destiny. The daughter who refused to inherit dysfunction and chose to create healing instead. I drove toward my chosen family, my real celebration, my earned happiness. In the rearview mirror, the house grew smaller until it was just another building in a city full of stories. But the story being written there now was one of hope over hurt, transformation, over tragedy, rising over remaining fallen. And that was a story worth every scar it took to tell it. The beginning. If you've made it to the end of this story, you've witnessed a journey from betrayal to triumph, from ashes to empire. But here's what I want you to remember. Claudia's story isn't unique in its pain. Family betrayal happens every day in every community to people who deserve better. What made the difference was her choice to rise rather than remain fallen. Have you experienced family betrayal? Have you been forced to rebuild from nothing, or do you know someone struggling with the aftermath of family destruction? I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments below. Your truth might be the hope someone else needs to see today. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. We share stories of resilience and rebuilding every week, proving that your worst chapter doesn't have to be your last chapter. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that might change your perspective on what's possible after betrayal. And please share this video with anyone who needs to hear that betrayal isn't destiny that chosen family can heal. What birth family broke, that rising from ashes, isn't just possible. It's powerful. Thank you for spending time with Claudia's journey. Remember, you are not defined by who betrayed you, but by how you choose to rise. Your empire is waiting to be built one choice at a time, one day at a time, one phoenix rise at a time. Until next time, keep rising.